Hello, my friends, and welcome to this, our version of our 2020 live draft, this time with even more experts. This is going to be a great 2 hours-ish, a 16-round PPR draft with 12 wonderful people from across the fantasy football landscape. We're going to section everyone off into 4 groups of 3 drafters and kicking us off in rounds 1 through 4. First, I'll introduce the man you always know. His name is Patrick Darding. If you're catching us on our YouTube video, oh my gosh, what a mustache and what a look, Pat.
I'm way too pleased with myself. Like, I was so excited for Andy to see this, and Scott, but especially Andy. And yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't overly self-satisfied right now.
Well, I'll introduce the other 2 people we have with us in this first group. It is Andy Behrens and Scott Pianowski, 2 wonderful people from Yahoo. Gentlemen, how are you?
I'm intimidated by this new like young Andy Reid / Sheriff Jim Hopper aesthetic we're getting from Pat. To be honest, I'm not normally intimidated to be in a draft with Pat Daugherty, but this is getting me.
That was the plan.
I'm really excited
to
that
get
we
in your
have a
head.
video component. Pat, I loved you in Argo, and Andy, I love this Juwan Howard Fab Five look that you're pulling off, man. So if you do win the championship, it will be vacated probably 5 or 10 years down the road. But I love the look nonetheless.
I knew I couldn't get in Scott's head, by the way. That's why I was just focusing on Andy. And I mean, too, see the jacket. I'm just a classier individual than Andy too. This is all about getting in his head.
We're having way too much fun for the draft that has already started. Let's pull it up here on the big screen. I want to go through the draft order. JJ Zachariason is first pick, John Daigle is second pick, Hayden Winks is third pick, Andy Behrens fourth, Lauren Carpenter is fifth, Rich Rebar at 6th, Patrick Daugherty at 7, Chris Allen at 8. The Ball Blast women, Kate and Michelle, are at 9, Denny Carter at 10, Scott Pianowski at 11, and Howard Bender at 12. This is a 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 2 flex, 7 bench spots. So yes, we eliminated kicker and defense, and I'm sure Denny Carter will yell at us later on. Andy, you're actually on the clock already. We are speeding through this. There's a reason why I wanted to put you at number 4, and it's this reason. Christian McCaffrey went 1, Saquon Barkley went 2, Ezekiel Elliott went 3. So talk us through your mindset here. You go a number of ways at the number 4 overall pick.
Yeah, I could be tempted. Were this a half PPR draft, I could be tempted by Alvin Kamara. I could be tempted by Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think he's a totally reasonable pick here as perhaps a centerpiece player and a great offense. But I can't, in full PPR, I can't really veer away from Michael Thomas, right? Last year, and obviously it's one of the great seasons in the history of the position, record setting, all that. He was 98 points better than the number 2 fantasy receiver in full PPR last year. And so, okay, he regresses all the way to 2018. He's still 125 catches and 1,400 yards. So I think he's a pretty easy call here for me in this format.
Scott is, as another Yahoo brethren, is that the same type of pick you would have made?
I would have gone with a running back just because I just more emotionally satisfied when I have that. I believe in the anchors away. You get one running back anchor who you feel really good about. And then there's just so much great receiver depth. Andy would have gotten a great receiver at 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round. You could still have one of the best receiving groups in the league and have that 1st round anchor. So maybe Andy didn't like Kamara or Cook or Henry as much as some other people do. Nothing against Thomas, whose volume is delightful, but I would have leaned running back probably with any of the first 5 or 6 picks. That's the way I would have played it.
Well, after Andy, Lauren selected Alvin Kamara. Rich took Dalvin Cook. So that means, Pat, you're on the board here with number 7.
It means, first off, I know this was intentional, putting me in the number 7 jail. This is like the least desirable spot, I feel like, all summer is 6 or 7. And my dream here is to get Michael Thomas, usually to have people kind of have the 2020 running back panic and, psych themselves out into thinking there's only 5 or 6 true foundational backs, which of course is true. So I guess they're not actually psyching themselves out. But even in full PPR, like, I want to go receiver here after missing out on the big 4 or 5 at running back, but I'm going to make Hayden Winks upset. I'm going to make a few people on the staff upset, and I'm just going to take a special player in Derrick Henry.
Wow.
And, you can hear the Yahoo sound there. It approves of the pick. And he has no backup whatsoever this year. There's no Deion Lewis to siphon, even like 10 to 20 catches. I never understood why the Titans don't feature like at least 3 to 4 screens per game to Derrick Henry. I think the receiving usage will actually go up a little bit this year. And I just think most importantly, after hopefully learning their lesson in both 2018 and 2019, the Titans commitment will begin in week 1 and not week 9 or 10. And Derrick Henry's running is just such a special trade. I can't pass on him here.
Andy, I've got to be honest. Chris Allen took the selection I would have taken at number 7, especially with a PPR format, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because I think the ceiling is just absolutely incredible in the best offense in the NFL.
Yeah, I fully agree. Again, I think he was a consideration at 4. I'm that big of a believer in the talent, right? He's a gifted receiving threat. We know that. And he sure looks like he's going to be basically a foundational back for the Chiefs, an offense that's going to average 30 to 35 points per game. The thing about, Damian Williams a couple years ago when he was just absolutely carrying us to fantasy titles in the final 5-6 weeks of the season, he was only seeing 15 touches per game. That was his average, 15 touches per game. I think Edwards-Helaire is going to be at least 18, 20, 22, like right out of the gate. So yeah, I think he's an absolutely first half of the first round player for sure, especially in this format.
Scott at number 11. It's an interesting spot to be. What you're thinking of with your first round selection here?
Yeah, it is an interesting spot. I wasn't thrilled with it. Pat called the 7-pick jail, and since he's dressed for the witness protection program, I'm not worried if they put Pat in jail. I'm sure they'll find a nice place for him in Arizona somewhere. But again, I talk about this anchors away strategy. I want one running back who I can hitch my wagon to, and then I'll start pounding the receiver position and maybe take a vanity tight end. And Joe Mixon has succeeded on some Cincinnati teams that had a lot going wrong, poor offensive lines, spotty quarterback play. I think Joe Burrow being a year older than the average quarterback, a year or two older than the average quarterback prospect is going to help him. There's a lot of talent on this offense. I think the Bengals will be a really competitive, frisky kind of 7-9, 6-10 team. So give me a 3 down on the field at all times running back in Joe Mixon.
Pat, any concern here with Joe Mixon that he is potentially a running back playing behind the league's worst offensive line?
No, because I still think, at least to begin the year, despite, the new pass-heavy setup and, all the good things they have going now for the passing game, the Bengals, the second half of 2019, they committed to Joe Mixon like as heavily as a team can commit to a running back. And I think at least early in the season that will remain the case. Giovanni Bernard's officially kind of faded from memory. For years we've been kind of like wish casting with Joe Mixon, but we finally saw that in the second half last season. I do think that's going to carry over. Still a special young player. Still does everything you want from a fantasy back. You have to be a true 3-down back. Unless you're Derrick Henry, you have to be a true 3-down back to be a first-round fantasy running back. And I think Joe Mixon there is a steal in 11.
Scott, I will say, I think it's smart to go with the running back there if tight end was a consideration, because it's not like Howard is going to double up here at the tight end position on the turn. So if you do want a Kelsey or a Kittle, at least one of those would have been back here on your return pick.
Right. And the great thing about drafting Kittle is I would put Andy immediately on tilt as the University of Iowa truther. And I also just want to back up to when Patrick took Derrick Henry. I agree with him that Henry's never going to be Tomlinson, or he's never going to be McCaffrey. He's not going to catch a ton of passes, but I feel like there's a skill here that he could catch 35 or 40 and be relatively effective. I think that's in play. And Tennessee's the rare team that they run to set up the run, right? I mean, they're going to take some shots to A.J. Brown, and I'm in on A.J. Brown. I know the efficiency will dip, but he'll get a lot more opportunity this year. But Henry, there's no game situation. If Tennessee falls behind 10-0, Derrick Henry's still involved. The fact that he's not as PPR friendly as a lot of running backs, I don't think that should dissuade you from drafting him when Pat did. I think that's the way to go. Now, my pick is going to be up in a second, and I'm thinking a lot of things here. I'd like to get that number 1 receiver. I will consider one of the vanity tight ends because I feel good about Mixon. Maybe I don't want to go to Miles Sanders. He's got some injury concerns. Kenyon Drake just got picked by Jonathan Bender. Howard Bender. Who's Jonathan Bender?
Howard.
Basketball player. I wasn't really sure what to do with Drake with the setback. He's never been a full-time player for a complete season. I know he was the running back 4 in 8 games with Arizona, but I don't know if we can trust Drake for a full season. If you get Drake, then you have to draft Chase Edmonds. And I just hate being tied to that type of mandate. So I feel like I have a lot of options here. Tyreek Hill would get me into a loaded Kansas City offense. Julio Jones is just about as safe as it gets. Kittle or Kelsey would be fine. I guess Kittle would probably be my lean there. I'm going to fly with Andy Reid. I'm going to fly with Patrick Mahomes. I think
Wow.
there's a lot of ways I could go here. I know Hill was hurt last year and missed about a month of the season, but nobody can cover the cheetah. The team speed on Kansas City is just unfair. So give me the dynamic Tyreek Hill at pick 14.
Sorry, my exclamation was I thought you were going to go quarterback here in round 2, which would have been an early upset in this draft. Just putting a bow on your Derrick Henry comment. I think he averaged like 2 targets last season. And if he just doubles that in per game, which, Arthur Smith has done a great job as a play caller during his early times as a play caller in the NFL, if you can just script up a couple more flare passes or screen passes to Derrick Henry, just doubling those targets for the year makes it very, very simple. Andy, want your comment here. I mean, we've gotten through 2 picks of round 2. The 2 top tight ends that are clearly in a tier of their own are separate and still on the board. I always have seen this summer so many tight ends go either Kittle and Kelsey in that first round turn at the end of round 1. Are you surprised that they're still on the board here?
I have had several drafts so far where I've had, near the turn picks, not necessarily 12, but I'll have 10, 11, 12. And I've pretty routinely tried to go chief stacking, right? Like I've had a couple where I've gone with both Hill and Kelsey there. I think that's a pretty fun build, again, for an offense that just can't go wrong. So we're right at the point where I'm starting to get a little bit excited about the possibility of getting Kelsey in round 2, which is probably going to blow up and it won't happen. But like it's out there for me as a possibility right now. And that is definitely the direction that I would go. Again, in PPR, I actually don't feel the way Scott does about the running back position. There's guys that are typically available, routinely available in rounds 3, 4, 5 that I really like there in this format. And if I can get players who are just dominant receiving threats and huge positional edges like Thomas, like Kelsey, if I can get that out of the first couple rounds, I'm pretty happy with it.
I'm curious you say that because I look at that round 3, round 4 running back, and I see guys like Gurley, I see guys like Fournette, and they're players I'm running away from. You're going to draft before me in the 3rd round anyway. I'm just curious what type of running backs you see there that you feel good about.
No, I think that's a minefield. I think it's more the guys that I can get in 4 and 5 and 6, I probably should say, because we can go all the way down to Mark Ingram, who I love and I think is kind of a gift. I love DeAndre Swift this year. I think he's kind of a gift, and those guys routinely slip to 5 and 6. That's a fine backfield for me in full PPR. If it accompanies, absolutely dominant receivers and tight ends.
I think Ingram's a terrific target because everybody knows he's going to regress, but he can regress a fair amount and still be a really good player. You can't bank on those receiving touchdowns he had last year, but I think he's going to have like a Frank Gore career where it's going to be, Mark Ingram's still here at age 33, at age 35. I have a feeling he's going to really age gracefully at a position where that is rarely the case.
So after Scott took Tyreek Hill at the 202, Julio Jones went to Denny Carter. Then Miles Sanders went to Kate and Michelle. Then Chris Allen took Austin Eckler. That means Patrick Daugherty. You have about 30 seconds to make your selection here.
I do. I thought about going George Kittle just to subtweet Andy, and also because I love George Kittle. And I think I've arrived at George Kittle tight end 1, by the way, over Travis Kelsey. But my original plan here was DeAndre Hopkins or Tyreek Hill. Scott took Tyreek. I'll take DeAndre, which has kind of become somehow like a controversial opinion for me this year, especially with Evan Silva. We briefly talked on the phone about it the other day. DeAndre Hopkins is his wide receiver 14. Amongst many worries, he has the changing teams. But Josh, you've heard my DeAndre Hopkins spiel so many times. No one was more starved for quality targets than the Arizona Cardinals. And the Cardinals, they were a surprisingly versatile offense last year, but they want, to still be passing based. They want to pass more this year, maybe 40 to 50 more attempts. And they just needed somewhere that they could funnel those looks beyond, like an aging Larry Fitzgerald or an uneven, inconsistent Christian Kirk. And they went out and aggressively addressed this huge need with, one of the best compilers, one of the highest floor players in all of fantasy football. And just even with some people are concerned, don't think he can reach the number of targets. I still think 150 targets is in play for DeAndre Hopkins. And I think he's been used better too. Last year, he was turned into almost like a Julian Edelman type receiver for the Texans, whereas this year I think he's going to get to be more DeAndre Hopkins, get to do more, use his insane body control along the sideline with Kyler Murray, who to me has great sideline accuracy. And I just think the floor is still there, and I still think DeAndre Hopkins' ceiling is wide receiver 1 overall. So I love getting DeAndre Hopkins in the 2nd round.
If I can just piggyback on what Pat is saying, one of the things that I love about Arizona's offense is that they actually have like almost total year-to-year continuity except they added one of the 3 to 5 best receivers in all of football, right? Like everything, like it's second year in the system for Kyler Murray. Everything basically remains the same that we care about. And then, oh yeah, we added an absolutely dominant receiver. So like teams that just add one component, I'm feeling pretty good about. And we've obviously seen DeAndre Hopkins survive some far worse situations than this.
Andy, was that a positive statement about a Patrick Dark? is this an alliance that has formed behind the scenes? Is this like one of those massive turns in wrestling that no one expected?
Again, like I'm seeing him on camera, and that's not Pat, and I'm like, oh, who's the new guy? I'll throw on to the new guy, and then crap.
Not to make this an Andy Barron's monologue, but I also saw a major sigh of relief, like you lost about 20 pounds when your pick came up because George Kittle was still on the board, and that's someone we've talked about for the last 2 rounds, and he was your selection here in the second round.
Yeah, I was going to flip out and probably ruin all of Pat's good thoughts about DeAndre Hopkins. Had Lauren selected Kittle ahead of me, that I would have absolutely lost it. That would have been bad. Now I'm agitating for us to play this thing out. I know you've been talking about how this is just a mock. We're not going to play it out. If you're going to let me start Michael Thomas and George Kittle, I'm afraid we have to play this thing out. I'm not going to let this league be deleted.
I'll let you send that email to the other 11 managers in this league, and you make that pitch. I do
we know
say,
they have Yahoo connections. I mean, they can probably make this league undeletable. So
for sure, I'm converting this to a pro league. You're all going to have to send in $100.
Just to backtrack here a little bit, after Pat took DeAndre Hopkins, Rich took Travis Kelce, Lauren then took Aaron Jones. We've mentioned the Andy Barron's George Kittle pick. Hayden doubled up at running back with James Conner. Then it was Kenny Galladay to Daigle and Chris Godwin to JJ along with Adam Thielen. I'm mentioning all these picks for the podcast out there. For the video version, you can go over to NBC Sports' YouTube channel and it's up there. But if you want to vice versa, you need to take it with you in your pocket. If you're watching us on YouTube, go and check out the Rotoworld Football Podcast. It's available all on every single podcast platform out there. Andy, I've got to ask though, man. I mean, at least for me, the roster construction that I like to start with this entire summer are 2 running backs. It just makes you feel better. It's like Linus carrying the blanket with them, right? Well, you've gone complete 0 running back to start here with a wide receiver and a tight end. Almost all of those feature quote unquote backs that actually are on good teams that we feel good about are off the board. Any concern here?
No, not really. Again, that's kind of smoothed out by format, right? Full PPR makes I don't know. It leaves me with a lot of rosters that I wouldn't necessarily like in half PPR leagues and standard leagues. But there's just no way that I can pass on somebody like Michael Thomas, who gives you such a potentially enormous positional edge there. I feel kind of the same about Kittle. Like I feel like there's a tier of Kelce and Kittle, and then there's an empty tier. And then we get down to, Ertz and Andrews and all the rest. I just feel like those are 2 huge positional edges that I can't really pass up. The one thing that's important that Scott alluded to is that you don't want to chase this sort of minefield of running backs that is present in like rounds 3 and round 4. I might have liked James Conner here. I'm a little less into some of the running backs that I see bubbling up to the top right now. So I'm probably going to wait again. It's my turn. I'm on the clock right now. Like this is where I start actually thinking about the 2 elite quarterbacks as well, but I'm probably not going to go there. There's a handful of guys that I really want that I don't think I would be able to get in the next round. So I'm actually going to pull the trigger.
I'm going to take Trubisky if you don't. So it's
okay.
time.
Well, Now we're gonna have to play for $200. I'm gonna go Terry McLaurin here because he's not coming back to me. And I love it. Like I think I may have the guy who's going to finish number 1 and the guy who's going to finish number 2 in total wide receiver targets this year.
Yeah, McLaurin reminds me of Joe Mixon in that we saw him succeed in an offense where everything was going bad around him. I feel like that's the floor. What if they actually get some competent offensive design and some offensive play around McLaurin? Yeah, I think he's a huge upside. I think Andy took him at the top of his range, but I don't know anybody who doesn't love this guy.
Yeah, Terry McLaurin is unofficially Rotoworld's official player of 2020, so I'm glad he went so early in this. Scott, speak on that a little bit because – I mean, I think Andy just went through something that we all go through at points in drafts where, he's not going to pick again until the 409, yet he wants Terry McLaurin on his team. So ADP be damned, he's absolutely going to take him when he can.
Yeah, I think you have to believe in your convictions. And I also like that Andy didn't feel pressured into taking a running back, because a lot of people won't have the personality to do that. I mean, I'm going to take a running back probably in the first 2 rounds, but even though Andy knows he needs running backs, he doesn't think the value makes sense in 3rd round. So he's willing to pivot somewhere else and trust that he can find, this is what zero RB is. You trust that you can find good value elsewhere, and that the chaos of the position will ultimately be something you can bank on later in the season. So I admire that Andy trusted his conviction on McLaurin, and also didn't feel forced into making a positional scarcity pick. He has the confidence. He's drafted before, and he knows he can still cobble together a decent running back attack. I think you need to trust yourself in that situation.
Pat, you just made your 3rd round selection, and it was Mike Evans. Why?
Well, I felt immediately a little less good about it because I was debating the whole time I was on the clock between Mike Evans and DJ Moore, and then Chris Allen literally immediately took DJ Moore. And to me, I was just trying DJ Moore. In the PPR, I've had a lot of drafts this year start where I get DeAndre Hopkins and DJ Moore in the 2nd or 3rd round. I went away from DJ this time just because it hasn't usually bothered me, but just in my head while I was on the clock, there's so many potential target hogs on this Panthers team, and there's not so many target hogs. I mean, we know Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore are the target hogs, but then I wouldn't be surprised to see Curtis Samuel take an incremental step forward this year. Obviously, Ian Thomas can take another incremental step forward. Obviously, now they have a legitimate 3-receiver set and Robbie Anderson. And I just decided, instead of trying to bank on DJ Moore's his floor, his compiling, which can maybe be a little lower this year than last year, I'll bet on the huge upside with Mike Evans, where we know this is Tom Brady and he loves underneath efficiency above all else. But it is still Bruce Arians, and it is still Mike Evans. They've spent all the summer talking about how Tom Brady still can hit the deep ball, is developing a nice connection with Mike Evans. And again, just kind of like Derrick Henry, just a special player that maybe we shouldn't overthink so much, especially in the 3rd round. I'm comfortable betting on Mike Evans' huge overall upside, because there's still a lot of floor left at the receiver position later on.
Mike Evans has played 6 seasons in the NFL. In all 6 seasons, he's crossed 1,000 yards. I mean, that's one of those figures and stats that I think flies under the radar right now. And it's like, it's so weird this offseason. I understand that the team is going to look drastically different in offense, because it goes from a team that's going to be in negative game script situations trying to play YOLO ball to one that's going to want to play in command and maybe be more efficient. Okay, I kind of like if we just got rid of what we thought of the Bucs last year, what it is this year with Tom Brady throwing to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. To me, Andy, people are kind of dropping these Bucs players just a little bit more than they should.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, where Evans, it's okay.
Well, where Evans fell here is fine, right? Like, should he go at the end of the 2nd round? There's a case to be made there. He would have been under consideration. Like, if I'm in a hometown draft here, I probably wouldn't have taken McLaurin there. I just thought there was no shot that I was going to get him coming back, and I don't really mind passing on Evans here. There's so many new things in Tampa Bay, beginning with the quarterback spot, right? And they bring Gronk in, and there's just so much newness. And I've steered away from a lot of those offenses so far. But I don't think this was a terrible long fall for Mike Evans. I think this is about the right spot for him.
Scott, you just made your 3rd round selection. I mean, in round 2, you talked about the explosiveness of Tyreek Hill. Well, you followed that up with Amari Cooper, obviously part of the Dallas Cowboys, an offense that so many of us want shares of this year.
Yeah, it could be the 2nd best offense. I think everybody would pick Kansas City first, but Dallas is in the running to be the 2nd most explosive offense. And because Hill, as great as Hill is, he's a long ball guy. He's not going to be somebody who's going to necessarily get tons of target volume. I wanted somebody who would kind of smooth that out a little bit, be a little bit more of a base player, a little bit more of a consistency player at a position, admittedly, where most of the guys have some boom or bust nature. So I thought Cooper made a lot of sense here. I also considered Cooper Kupp one of 3 players who had double-digit receiving touchdowns last year. I mean, it just shows how spread the usage is in the NFL these days, that now 7 or 8 touchdowns is what 10 used to feel like. At least it sure seems like that the last couple of years ago. I just want to throw in about Mike Evans. I think Pat got him about as late as he's going to go in almost any draft. And I want to ask you, Mike Evans has played with a lot of bad situations in Tampa. I know he was kind of a fit for what Jameis was good at, and maybe Godwin's the better fit for Tom Brady than Evans. But when is Mike Evans, to back up what Josh was saying, when has Mike Evans ever let you down? When have you ever regretted owning this guy? I think having him, I know the quarterback's ancient and all that, but the usage tree is probably pretty narrow there. I don't see a 3rd receiver. I'm not buying Gronkowski's return as being anything that important. So I think Mike Evans is a really nice floor pick. Maybe his upside is a little bit capped now, but I mean, look, he's going to have 1,100 yards again because he always does.
I mean, he posted almost 1,200 yards last year in just 13 games. You know, like I think the situation, again, while it's going to be different from a volume perspective, you change that with efficiency, and I'm all for it. So,
I mean, good players fit with other good players too. And see, the age is obviously the biggest wild card. But to be Tom Brady, when Tom Brady has good weapons, he does not let those good weapons go to waste. He doesn't let good weapons wither on the vine. Like, he relentlessly exploits them and uses them. And he just didn't have them the past few years in New England. Like, Tom Brady is going to be, I mean, horrible cliche, but like a kid in a candy store with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And I just have a hard time believing Tom Brady will not figure out a way to get the most out of Mike Evans. And maybe it's not going to be like deep ball after deep ball with like it was with Jameis Winston. But Tom Brady is going to find a way to make it work with both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
after Scott selected Amari Cooper, Bender went with Calvin Ridley and Cortland Sutton. So that means, Scott, you are back on the clock.
Yeah, much love to Howie, but I got to admit, Cortland Sutton's a guy I'm afraid to pick. Love the player, hate the situation. I'm not sure the quarterback's any good. And all Kansas City did was add offensive pieces who are going to get their share too. I think it's a crowded offense. And even though Sutton is a guy I'm in love with talent-wise, I mean, I think everybody is. I just a little bit scared to pull the trigger. 15 minutes ago, we all loved the Rams. We all loved Sean McVay. And, I almost took Cooper Kupp last round. Why not take him here? Jared Goff isn't great. I think he's good enough. I think, again, it's a team that has a very narrow usage tree. They don't have Brandon Cooks to get in the way anymore. And although Robert Woods is kind of the trendy expert pick at the touchdown regression, but by the way, up to like 5 or 7 touchdowns. I mean, Robert Woods isn't going to score double-digit touchdowns, but there's plenty of room for Kupp on this offense. I think he's probably a 90 catch, 1050 yardage, and 7 to 9 touchdowns. A very safe and a really fun wide receiver 3 for my roster.
I was going to ask you, Scott, but you answered it. Why Cooper Kupp over Robert Woods? So I'll ask Andy Behrens that same question. If both were on the clock for you, Andy, which one would you take?
Oh, it would definitely be Kupp. Yeah. Kupp. Well, Robert Woods just does not see like a lot of end zone target. Scott hit an important point there in that it has suddenly become a pretty narrow usage tree, right? Like they basically stopped throwing to the running back position. It's Higbee. It looks like it's going to be Woods, and it's going to be Kupp. I would certainly favor Kupp as the guy with the greatest chance to reach double-digit touchdowns. So I've got him a little bit ahead of Woods, but I think they both finished. Like, I think Kupp probably challenges for wide receiver 1 status, and I think Woods is very solidly a wide receiver 2. I just want to say, this is entirely unrelated, but Danny Carter really got me on the DJ Chark pick. That was going to be my next selection. Like, I routinely get that guy. It's very rare that I don't get DJ Chark. I think he's a top 10 wide receiver this year, and I'm a little bit tilting that Denny did it. It's also like, what does that say about me as an analyst that Denny is on the same guy that I am?
We were given the early rounds in this draft to be on video, so we won't be talking later, and I won't get to say how much I love the Minshew to Chark thing. I want Gardner Minshew in my Superflex leagues, or as a wild card upside backup quarterback. If your format, it makes it reasonable to take one of those guys. I think they're going to be a carnival. I don't trust Fournette at all. They have the lowest win projection total in the league. They're just going to be playing that YOLO Tampa Bay style of football. I think going to be a lot of Chark, a lot of Minshew. I think there'll be a lot of DFS value in Minshew also, and at least until his salary recovers. So I totally agree with that. And look at CD, by the way, 4 receivers, man.
I know.
He is.
I was going to mention that, Scott, because, we spend all summer. I've talked to the likes of Pat and Hayden and Daigle and Denny all summer long. So I love having these new voices just like you come on. And it's fascinating because you're mentioning Denny's team. He's starting with 4 wide receivers. Meanwhile, Lauren has started with 3 running backs, and Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, and Chris Carson. So we're going to get 2 drastically different teams at the end of this. Pat, after Scott took Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett, and then Leonard Fournette went to Kate and Michelle, and then Chris Allen selected Robert Woods. Pat, who are you looking at here?
I'm trying to decide between Keenan Allen and Mark Andrews, and Keenan Allen is just always a mental block for me because it's the perception and I think kind of reality that a lot of his production usually comes in like 2 or 3 games. And this year without the wild horse Phillip Rivers, you got the really conservative rookie Justin Herbert or the really conservative veteran Tyrod Taylor. I don't think I can bring myself to pull the trigger on Keenan Allen, and I'm going to go Mark Andrews just because something we've talked about a lot over the summer. the damage he did on the limited usage last year, what was it, 40% of the snaps? Like, the room to grow for Mark Andrews in a year, where he was banged up all year. He's healthy now. An offense that needed more weapons at the receiver position and just didn't add them. A young player who's going to continue to get better, and it's just a huge play. He can be both a compiler and a big play threat up the seam, and someone who really not dark horse. I mean, would anyone of us be really surprised if he finished in the top 2 at tight end? I mean, we know Kelsey and Kittle are in a tier by their own, but I mean, no one would be surprised that Mark Andrews joined that tier. And just someone who's so important to such an explosive offense, who has so much easy room to grow when it comes to usage. I really like getting Mark Andrews here.
And go look at the way Greg Roman schemes him open for walk-in touchdowns, right? Yep. I mean, he's with the reigning MVP at quarterback and an offensive designer who's brilliant. I think Mark Andrews in the 4th round is a terrific value and a pick that I'd be happy to make on a lot of my teams.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, go ahead. To Pat's point, Mark Andrews was on the injury list all year, right? Like, we were kind of sort of worried about him midweek all season long. So a healthy Mark Andrews at this point is pretty much a gift.
Not to use hyperbole, but I mean, I think tight end 1 is in the range of outcomes. I mean, he played about 43% of the snaps last year for what Andy mentioned. He might not score, 10 touchdowns again on 43% of the time, but if that jumps up to 70, 75%, I think he can maybe reach that 10 touchdown mark once again, and hopefully the volume goes up. All right, Andy, the window of you 3 is about to close. In the 4th round, you selected Mark Ingram.
Yeah, I was actually pretty tempted by the quarterbacks as well, because this is about as far as you'll ever see Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson both fall, right? Like, they routinely go, even experts drafts, you see them go in round 3 typically. And in terms of Yahoo ADP, they both go inside the top 24. So the quarterbacks tempted me. But again, Ingram is a guy who finished as a top 8 fantasy running back last season. I know they drafted Dobbins. We're all kind of interested in him long-term, and I think he's obviously going to be the long-term replacement there. But I never expect a team, when something works spectacularly well, which is exactly Mark Ingram's situation last year, 15 touchdowns, 5 yards per carry. He did nothing wrong, and I don't expect them to veer away from him, certainly early in the season, unless he suffers an injury. So I think Mark Ingram is basically in the same situation that he was last year, and he falls to round 4, round 5.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being the guinea pigs of this experiment. You've joined me for these 4 rounds. You all know Pat, but I do, again, want to shout out Andy Behrens. You can follow him at Andy Behrens on Twitter, and obviously Scott Pianowski. It's Scott_Pianowski. Both do wonderful work over at Yahoo. They've helped with this draft for years, and even in this different year, they've helped us once again. Gentlemen, thanks so much. The best deal in fantasy football is still available. Yes, it's our draft guide / season-long tools. The best way to go to that is rotoworld.com/edge. I mean, it has our cheat sheet, our draft magazine, all different types of scoring, mock drafts, so many columns, articles, a profile on every single player. We have monthly and annual subscriptions. And if you do want to buy one of those annual ones, just use promo code DRAFT10 to get $10 off. I mean, for your draft month, if you just want to pay for the single month, it's $10. That's the best deal in fantasy football. Once again, that is rotoworld.com/edge. We're going to welcome in some other people in just a moment. Chris Allen is here. Chris, how are you, man? From 4-4 Football and Number Fire. How's things going so far, Chris?
It's going great. Like I mentioned yesterday when we got a chance to chat and do a quick mic check, I appreciate the invite. I mean, so many great analysts here in the draft, so I'm happy to be hanging out with y'all this fine Tuesday afternoon.
And Hayden is also on. We talk to Hayden every single week, so I also want to say hello to Howard Bender of Fantasy Alarm. Howard, how are you?
I'm good, Josh. How are you, man? Thanks also for having me, man. It's an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, this is perfect timing because Hayden Winks, you are on the clock here at the 3rd pick of round 5. Let me run through your team so far. It's Ezekiel Elliott in round 1, James Conner round 2, Allen Robinson round 3, DK Metcalf round 4, and you just selected a quarterback in Patrick Mahomes in round 5. You're smiling, Hayden.
Does this mean I lose my expert card because I drafted the best quarterback in the NFL in the 5th round?
Absolutely.
Tell us why. Why did you? Because I know we talk a lot this summer that late round quarterback can at times be a cheat code, but in other occasions we say, hey, if Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson are there in that 3-4 turn, that is highly intriguing. Well, you got them even later in round 5.
Yeah, I've only been drafting Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes when I have one of their teammates on my roster already, and I'm kind of making the exception here just because Patrick Mahomes in the 5th round becomes a value. We've always talked about how quarterbacks, the scoring is pretty flat throughout, and that's why we like to wait on our quarterbacks. But Patrick Mahomes has way more upside than just about any other quarterback in the league outside of Lamar Jackson. So I think that we can project him to score 3, 4, 5, 6 more points than all the other quarterbacks, including like the next tier below them, the Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray. So at some point he becomes a value. I think the round 4, round 5 is exactly where that is. And even though I don't have a Travis Kelce, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or anybody else, I'm still totally fine with Patrick Mahomes. Maybe I'll draft one of the receivers later.
So we're through 5 picks of round 5. Let me just run through them for everyone out there. JJ took T.Y. Hilton, then Daigle, Lamar Jackson. Again, Hayden with Patrick Mahomes. Melvin Gordon went to Andy for his second running back. And then Lauren selected Michael Gallup. Chris, we're nearing your pick here in the middle of round 5. Since I didn't get to talk to you for your first 4 rounds, what do you like so far? What do you dislike? Everything going according to plan?
Not particularly. I mean, I will say that I wound up having to do a little bit of a reach. I'm not fully sold on the Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick at 8th overall, but I do think that with his projected volume in KC's offense, I mean, I do think that with the running backs that went ahead of him, or the players that went ahead of him, rather, I do think that he was a fine selection there. Would I preferred, a Miles Sanders had he been able to fall to me a little bit later? Yeah, possibly. But I do think that structurally so far, I think my team is fairly well set up, and we'll just have to see. I mean, Hayden he definitely took my pick. I was going to try and stack CEH with Patrick Mahomes, but he had the same idea, because I do believe that while we have had this late round quarterback methodology ingrained in us for however many years now, I do think that guys like Lamar, guys like Patrick Mahomes, if you're able to set your core in those first few rounds, I mean, pulling the trigger on one of those guys is definitely the way to go, especially this year. I mean, with so many other quarterbacks that have now had their values essentially inflated, I mean, whether it be due to rushing production or what have you, I do think there's a case to be made for some of those guys in the 4th or 5th round, not necessarily the 2nd or 3rd.
Howard, before Chris comes to his pick here, I do want you to run through your first 4 selections, and Nick Chubb, Kenyon Drake, Calvin Ridley, and Cortland Sutton. Anything stand out with any of those picks?
Nothing really stands out. This seems to be par for the course. I know that I'm a lot higher than most of the industry about Nick Chubb. I'm not worried about Kareem Hunt poaching all the touches. I think they'll work nicely in tandem together, but I think Nick Chubb really with this offense is going to really break loose. Kevin Stefanski coming over from Minnesota, he got firsthand look at what a Gary Kubiak, Rick Dennison running game looks like. And he's bringing that with him over to Cleveland. And that's going to be a lot of work for Nick Chubb. And, they're working on Baker Mayfield as well, which means that the passing game will improve a little bit. And that obviously means that defenses won't be able to stack the box against him. Kenyon Drake was an interesting call. Pianowski took Joe Mixon right in front of me. I would have paired Mixon and Chubb up together. That rarely happens. So I would have been super stoked about that here on the show. But I'm okay with Kenyon Drake. It's a high volume workload for him. Again, Chase Edmonds might get a couple of looks here and there. But overall, in a high powered offense like this with the air raid program that they use, 65 to 70% of the plays are passes. That to me says that, Kenyon Drake's going to still be doing what he did exactly last year, catching the ball in the flat and taking it between the tackles. So I'm a big fan there. Calvin Ridley, Cortland Sutton, you got to love your third-year wideouts. You got to love the guys who are ready to break out. I'm not too concerned about not getting the targets because Julio Jones is there. I think Calvin Ridley breaks out, and then Sutton's obviously the number 1. So,
Chris, you just made your 5th-round selection in Tyler Boyd, which I absolutely love. I know it's not the flashy pick that everyone loves, but one, I'll be fascinated if you maybe get Joe Burrow a little bit later on. But 2, we know he highly valued his slot target at LSU when Justin Jefferson. Was that along the thought process here in selecting Tyler Boyd as your 3rd wide receiver?
Basically, yeah, that's the whole, I guess, the thesis behind the play. But at least for me, when it comes to Tyler Boyd, I'll admit it. I live about an hour outside of Cincinnati. The Bengals, for I guess for lack of a better term, I'm indoctrinated into following Cincinnati for better or for worse. But I do think that last season, what was it, week 1 against the Seahawks in Seattle, they came out, I mean, with Andy Dalton firing at about a 78% passing rate. That's just in neutral game scripts. I mean, until Andy Dalton ultimately fumbled the game away in the rain. But I do think that that's how they want to operate, like under Zach Taylor. And we've already seen some issues with AJ Green. I'm hoping that he can make it through the entire season. But it looks like Tyler Boyd has really been that guy outside of, and what we've heard from practice reports, Auden Tate. So if I can wind up locking up at least a significant part of an offense that now passed this past season at a 63.8% rate in neutral game scripts, I do think that Tyler Boyd has the best chance to not necessarily repeat the number of targets. I mean, he had 140, 150 targets last season. Yeah. So I don't think he'll necessarily repeat that, but he should see a significant enough part of his offense to really pay off that his ADP.
Hayden, I'm going to ask you to analyze that selection, because I know that right before Chris selected Tyler Boyd, Will Fuller was selected. You might not get more different than Will Fuller versus Tyler Boyd with that pick.
Yeah, I think both of them are totally reasonable. This is where I want to be drafting these wide receiver 3 types. And I'm with Chris on this. I think the Bengals actually do want to pass the ball a ton. They have the skill position talent to do it. And I think they're going to be forced to do it anyways. But we saw them feature Joe Mixon down the stretch last year. I think that was just because they kind of gave up on the season. I think they truly want to pass the ball a lot. I think Joe Mixon will still be a very good player because he can catch the ball in the flat. I think he'll have more goal line opportunities. But I just think people are underestimating the Bengals offense. I mean, they have some serious dudes out there. AJ Green should be returning to practice this week. So with AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, and then a mixture of John Ross, T. Higgins, and Auden Tate, I think that's a pretty solid receiver core. So I'm high on the Bengals offense just in general.
All right, Howard, we talked about your first 4 picks and Nick Chubb, Kenyon Drake, Calvin Ridley, and Cortland Sutton. I mean, you start with 2 running backs and you just again doubled up at the running back position with David Montgomery and Cam Akers. A little bit of a surprise, I might say.
You can never have too many running backs. You can never have too many running backs. I mean, last year was an aberration in the fact that no running backs went down this year. And especially when we're talking about a league here where I've got 2 flexes. I actually thought about taking Kareem Hunt here because I know CD Carter going with that that 0 RB theory is primed to take a guy like Kareem Hunt. But I figured, listen, David Montgomery, to me, he's that number 1 guy in Chicago. Matt Nagy on the hot seat really needs to show that he can balance out this offense. Brought in Nick Foles to help with the passing game. I think Montgomery becomes that back that Nagy has always wanted. Good, solid pass catcher. Cam Akers. I think everybody's underrating Cam Akers a little bit here. They're all afraid of Darrell Henderson, currently dealing with a hamstring injury where we were told that they hope to have him back by the time week 1 starts. If that's a mild hamstring injury, then I'm a little concerned about their definition of the word hope. So I like Cam Akers a lot, who proved last year he could run behind a shaky offensive line in Florida State, caught passes as well. I think he's a good, solid move if you're looking for that rookie running back.
All right, Chris, you are back on the clock again. CEH, Austin Eckler, your first 2 picks. You have since gone full wide receiver in DJ Moore, Robert Woods, and Tyler Boyd. What's your mindset here for this selection?
I think I might be following this trend of running backs that I'm seeing here. And this is where my mindset when it comes to drafting switches over from best ball to a little bit more of a redraft perspective. Because typically in best ball, and I've heard both yourself and Hayden talk about this numerous times on your various podcasts over the last few weeks. When it comes to best ball, I would be fine with essentially setting a running back core in the early rounds and then just hammering wide receiver throughout here. But I think in redraft, I start to shift a little bit because I do want to have that flexibility to acquire some of those running backs that I do know will have some of those the money touches that we would want in the red zone, and should at least have at least a projectable floor week in and week out, so that if I need to, I can cycle out some of my starters. So in this case, I'm looking at what's available. I'm seeing, I mean, a lot of folks have been talking about Ronald Jones, like whether he can catch the ball out of the backfield or not. Kareem Hunt is also there. I'm thinking at least from a standalone value, I do like Ronald Jones and where he's currently at. So I think I'm going to go with him as my 3rd running back here, and then we'll see how the draft plays out afterwards.
Chris, I got to ask. I mean, We've seen Bruce Arians hype up people in the past, including Ronald Jones. We thought Ronald Jones might have a great opportunity in this offense last year. Is this a belief standpoint from a talent perspective on Ronald Jones, or is it more an opportunity standpoint when you're hooked to a team that almost certainly is going to have positive game script, efficiency, better offensive line blocking, and maybe the last one of this group and of this tier to get, 60% of the backfield work?
That's essentially it. I mean, because if you look at the track record of running backs that have been essentially attached to Tom Brady, I mean, they haven't always been like these flashy guys. I mean, when was it? Like 2 or 3 years ago, we were rooting for LeGarrette Blount in order to bang in about 19 touchdowns like in that season. So I mean, it's not always the flashy pick, but if you wind up investing in offense that you know are going to be efficient, tied to good passers, and that's the case for Ronald Jones, I do think there's at least some safety that comes in, and like at least a projectable floor again with a pick like that. So while I already have my 2 starters in Austin Eckler and CEH, I do think that having him as either a guy that I can rotate in for my bench, put in my flex spot, at least offers that floor week in and week out.
It's, funny in some ways that, we create podcasts, we listen to other people and read their content. And so many say, hey, avoid those running backs in rounds 4, rounds 5, and round 6. Well, when all of the writers have to get together and come up with drafts, someone has to draft them. And here we are in round 6. And the first 7 picks are running backs, and Cam Akers, David Johnson, Raheem Mostert, Devin Singletary, and DeAndre Swift. All right, Hayden, you're back up at the 6-10 selection. Who are you selecting?
Well, I was just kind of going to go off of that last statement. All of the wide receiver value that we kept preaching on our podcast, those guys just got drafted here. So that's why we've kind of seen the pivot back to running backs. I'm going to stop that train, though, and I'm going to go back to AJ Green. And Josh, we just talked about this earlier. There are lots of concerns, but I'm buying the Bengals offense, and he is going to return to the practice field later in this week. So I want to chase the upside. I need another receiver just based off of my build, and I think he's the last guy of this tier that has like true top 15 receiver potential. So I'll chase that upside.
All right, Hayden, I got to say it. And we're close, so I can say this to you.
I'm expecting to get roasted here.
This is my nightmare. This is truly my nightmare. You go from Julian Edelman, which is Andy's selection right before you, to AJ Green. And in a league that we are starting 3 wide receivers plus 2 other flex spots, AJ Green is your 3rd wide receiver right now. A player since the start of the 2018 season has played 9 games.
Yep. This is why when we're debating if we want an early round quarterback or not, me selecting Patrick Mahomes cost me a true wide receiver 3. So these are kind of the decisions we have to keep making. So I don't love that AJ Green's my wide receiver 3. I like him as my flex play just because the upside, I don't have to bank on him actually producing every week. But when you get together with a bunch of experts, all of a sudden your roster's not looking quite as strong as it once was.
Well, after you, Kareem Hunt went to Daigle. Then on the turn, JJ selected Deontay Johnson and Brandon Cooks. That makes it 5 wide receivers in his last 6 selections after selecting Christian McCaffrey. Not to make this a Hayden Winks monologue, but Hayden, you're back on the clock. You're going to save yourself here.
Well, I'm debating between 2 receivers, and they could not be further apart. It's Marvin Jones and Jamison Crowder. I can play the safe route and go Jamison Crowder. I know he's going to catch 90 passes, but once again, I'm gonna chase the ceiling here. I'm gonna take Marvin Jones just because I think the passing offense is pretty bankable. He's the clear-cut number 2 option in my opinion, and he wins downfield. He'll have some spiked weeks, and I'll chase that as my flex guy.
Once again, you all know Hayden Winks. I also, again, want to shout out Chris Allen, who's doing work with 4-4 Football and Numberfire, and obviously Howard Bender of Fantasy Alarm. Howard, settle this infighting we have a little bit here. What are your thoughts on Hayden's selections of AJ Green and Marvin Jones?
I love the Marvin Jones pick. I'm obviously bummed that he didn't fall, another 12 picks to me. But the AJ Green one, I'm with you, Josh. I got to tell you, that is awful. Already dealing with a hamstring issue. The dude has played 2 games in the last 3 years, and he's still, complaining about needing that contract, wanting that long-term deal, hates the franchise tag. This is a guy who I got roasted last year for telling people to drop him in week 4, week 5. I said, this dude is never getting back on the field. The Bengals haven't won a single game. So there's no reason for him to play. And now that he's back and he's supposed to be healthy, and he's already out with an injury. So, that definitely makes me nervous about him. You can chase the upside all you want, but I mean, if your guy is 6 to 8 games, playing in the season, really, is there any upside there?
In fairness to Hayden, and again, I want to break this groupthink bubble that I'm living in at this moment. If he does play 16 games, there is a chance for massive numbers connected to Joe Burrow, and should be that team's wide receiver one. So Hayden, I understand it from that perspective.
Well, the other guy I was going to take would have been Jamison Crowder, and picking Jamison Crowder around the 6-7 turns also kind of early. There's just a steep drop off once we get past the Stephon Diggs, Jarvis Landry's. We kind of get into this next tier where you kind of have to pick your poison. So that's why I think AJ Green becomes worth the battle. I don't want AJ Green, but he just kind of falls to me.
A few interesting recent picks. Zach Moss went to Andy Behrens as his running back 3 in the early part of round 7. So you will no longer be getting Zach Moss in round 9 anymore. Lauren was our 3rd quarterback here with Russell Wilson in round 3. I'm just looking at Rich Rebar's team. Dalvin Cook, Travis Kelce, Odell Beckham, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, DeAndre Swift, and Christian Kirk. Interesting construction here from Rich Rebar, who we'll get to a little bit later on. But Chris Allen, you're back on the clock here after selecting Ronald Jones in round 6.
Yep, and I think here I had a similar idea to Lauren, but just a different target here. So I've been really following like how the Cowboys have structured their team this past offseason rather. After getting rid of Jason Garrett, they bring in Mike McCarthy. I mean, do we really believe he's a true disciple of analytics? That seems to be the case. And the fact that they retain Kellen Moore has me just more enthusiastic about that offense. And if you're not excited about them drafting CeeDee Lamb, I don't know what else to tell you. So I think with Dak Prescott and his production this past in 2019, finishing as the QB3, and also like if not just the what he can do through the air, but also like on the ground with his 52 rush attempts, I think he is definitely one of those guys that has that QB1 upside. And now, like typically, from what I've seen in FFPC drafts, he would typically go as like the QB3. So if he can fall a spot to me and I can pick him up here, I think I'm pretty happy with that.
Hayden, what do you think about this value with Dak Prescott in the middle of round 7?
Yep, this is exactly where I would be drafting someone like Dak Prescott usually. And basically, Chris and I just kind of had a 2v2. I have Patrick Mahomes, Marvin Jones. He has Tyler Boyd, Dak Prescott. So these are kind of the similar trade-offs that you're making. And this is why we've been preaching why we haven't been drafting Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes in the 2nd round. But these 2v2s become way, way flatter when you're talking about a 5th round Mahomes and a 7th round Dak Prescott.
All right, Howard, you are about to be on the clock. I'm just trying to force with my eyes Scott Pianowski to make his selection. We can quickly move to you. I know that we're starting 3 wide receivers, and we have 2 flex spots here, Howard. Am I safe to assume that at least one of these selections is going to be a wide receiver for you?
I'm not so sure. I mean, it'll probably depend on who Pianowski takes right in front of me, although I don't think he's going to take a wide receiver. I probably should. It's the safe play. It's the smart play. I'm taking a look at, where I want to go. When you get to a certain point in a draft and you're looking at the running backs and you're looking at the wide receivers and nobody's really tickling your fancy too much, then you kind of pivot over to the quarterbacks and the tight ends and you look to see, what you've got there. And there's still, I think, some tremendous depth out there at both positions. But I think, for the sake of doing this and giving myself that little Arizona Cardinals stack, I think Kyler Murray is definitely going to be, in the fold for me here. 7th round, I see him in home leagues going in the 5th round, so I feel pretty good about that. Now the question is where do I go for the 2nd pick? I really, I tell you, I'm just going to play it safe, Josh. I'm going to make you feel better about my team because I see the concern in your face, and I worry about you sometimes. So, but I'm going to go with a guy who I think people think it's a little bit of an oddball pick. Not really an oddball pick, but, most rookie wide receivers don't get the respect beyond the Jerry Judys and the CeeDee Lambs. But I got to tell you, that Jalen Reagor, I love this kid so much. Such great speed. And I got to tell you, I think Carson Wentz, you want to talk about with AJ Green, what monster numbers he could put up in a 16-game season. Think about a 16-game season for Carson Wentz with all of these receiving weapons that he's got right now. I love Rieger's speed. I have no confidence in Jeffrey or Deshaun Jackson staying healthy for a full season. I think the bread is buttered on Jalen Rieger's side.
I think I've spoken with Hayden Winks for 27 straight shows about Jalen Reagor and Henry Ruggs, so I'll prevent from doing that once again. Chris Allen, what are your thoughts on the rookie wide receivers in totality this year, and namely Jalen Reagor?
Oh, I think the offseason narrative, let's say maybe a month or so, maybe 2 months ago, was that a lot of folks were trying to stay away just due to COVID and whatnot, and not just knowing how much time they would have to prepare. But at least my approach was just let's try and take these on a case by case basis. And Rager's name definitely jumped to the top of my list as guys that, I mean, they're walking into wide receiver one opportunity within their offenses. If it's not him, it's likely guys like Henry Ruggs. Brandon Ayuk, assuming he's okay. But similar guys in that realm where, I mean, you might be drafting them and it feels like a reach. But if you look at their projected volume, I mean, they're week one, they should be starting like for their respective offenses. So I like that pick. That actually was going to be my target for this round.
There we go. Hayden, I want to ask you, and I know on the podcast, we've talked about stacking quite often, but maybe some people are watching us on YouTube right now that haven't really dived into stacking as much as we have. I know it's a bit of an unconventional one going running back Kenyon Drake here with Howard and Kyler Murray, but what's the benefit of stacking in season-long leagues?
Yeah, you're just building correlation, and if you've already drafted Kenyon Drake in the second round or in the first round, that means that you think the offense is going to be good. So by default, that means you think Kyler Murray is going to have a good season. So it doesn't have to be your receiver or your tight end with your quarterback. It's just offenses in general. If Kyler Murray 3 for 3 touchdowns early in the game, then Kenyon Drake's probably going to luck into a 4th touchdown or at least get excess rushing volume. So it's perfectly reasonable. Do not throw out a RB to quarterback stack. That is definitely a good strategy to go by.
And Daigle has a major Baltimore Ravens stat going with Marquise Brown, Lamar Jackson, and J.K. Dobbins. So I absolutely ask him about that later on. All right, Chris Allen, you're back here on the board. Once again, your team, CEH, Austin Eckler, DJ Moore, Robert Woods, Tyler Boyd, Ronald Jones, and Dak Prescott.
So I know since we were just talking about it, I'm going to throw in another rookie wide receiver pick to add him as my wide receiver 4. And it is going to be Henry Ruggs here. I'm not completely enthusiastic about who he's tied to. I'm not a huge Derek Carr believer, but we're just now, over the last day or so, hearing about a Tyrell Williams injury. And we're just, I mean, for me, looking at him as a prospect, his ability to run, I mean, most of the routes within the route tree, the speed, the agility, I mean, I just think it's all there. And I think that with how they're going to wind up using him, like as a receiver, I think there's enough there for me to take him as a wide receiver 4 and not really feel as much risk associated with picking a rookie wide receiver.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I'll tell you why you should be comfortable with it because, and Hayden, we've talked about this a lot this summer. I think this mindset, because he ran like a sub 4.340, is that Henry Ruggs is just a vertical threat. He's so much more than that. Like, I think he's going to be even used short and intermediate more often and on manufactured touches more often than those vertical receptions. Like, he was a top 10 player in college football last season in terms of yards after the catch. And I think he's going to be that target player for them, that manufactured touch player that they don't have at all. And so while I understand that Derek Carr, when he does throw deep, he is very good and he's very efficient, but he just doesn't have that within him to want to do that. But again, while everyone is so concerned, well, he doesn't, throw as deep as often as we want him to, I'm not going to draft Henry Ruggs. Chris, I think you're right on the money with wanting to take him there. Howard, what's your view? I know you took Jalen Reagor, but what do you think of Henry Ruggs or any other rookie wide receiver this year?
Well, listen, I think Jerry Jeudy's going to get some good volume in Denver. I think CeeDee Lamb will be okay. I think he's going to suffer from the fact that Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper are there, and the offense is still supposed to run through Zeke. With Henry Ruggs, I think that it's a great upside pick here. Tyrell Williams already on the shelf. There really aren't any other major targets to compete. He can stretch the field. Listen, they were talking about working him out of the slot, which could mean some nice short slants, which is great for yards after the catch, especially with a guy with his kind of speed. I think the competition for targets is lacking in Las Vegas. So, I definitely think that Ruggs is a guy who can really step out in fantasy, probably is as good as anybody else.
Well, after Ruggs, Pat took Antonio Gibson. We have picks like Sterling Shepard and Emmanuel Sanders. But Hayden, as your group is closing out your time with us, you just selected the third rookie wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb. This is just becoming a theme of this group.
Yeah, we had to do it. This is where all these rookie receivers should be going. I'm with Chris here. I think that the narrative that these guys are going to struggle has been kind of overblown. And we got to remember, this was a class that was touted as one of the best of the last decade. These guys are legit players. They got drafted with great draft capital, and they have opportunity going in there. Even CeeDee Lamb, like the Cowboys have a ton of available targets because of Jason Witten and Randall Cobb. So Henry Ruggs, Jalen Reagor, CeeDee Lamb, these type of guys are going to be on the flex radar, I think, all year.
Well, gentlemen, I don't want this to be an abrupt goodbye, but we do have to bring in group number 3. Hayden, thank you. Chris and Howard Bender, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You guys taking your time and helping us out today. Again, do want to reiterate that we have the best deal in fantasy football. Yes, that is rotoworld.com/edge. You can go get our premium products, our draft guide, download our magazine, projections, tiers, rankings, cheat sheets, all that good stuff. If you sign up for the annual subscription, just use promo code DRAFT10. All right, let's now bring in group number 3 with us from rounds 9 through 12. That is John Daigle, who you all know, Rich Rebar making his big return to the show, and also the women of Ball Blast. Yes, Kate and Michelle Majuk, which I've been practicing this entire day. How's everyone?
We're good. How are you?
We're great. We're great. Daigle, I want to start with you because you just made your 9th round pick, and it was Tevin Coleman. I don't want to ask about that, though, because looking at your roster, you have the heaviest stack so far in Marquise Brown, Lamar Jackson, and J.K. Dobbins. What went into creating that?
First of all, JJ has been a nuisance this entire draft. So that went into a lot of it. No, so it came back to me in that Marquise Brown, Lamar Jackson range. And I had DK Metcalf in mind, who Hayden sniped 1 pick before me. I like Jonathan Taylor, as we've talked about a lot on this podcast, and JJ took him. And so once I grabbed Marquise Brown, I figured with the brand being a late round quarterback, Lamar would be safe. It turns out he wasn't as safe as I thought, but JJ did fortunately pass on him. So I started the stack. And from that point forward, it's the running backs I liked that continue to fall. The running back 3-4s that could possibly fall into RB2 roles, like your Kareem Hunt, Tevin Coleman, J.K. Dobbins. So, it's stacking the Ravens. It's not really much analysis that needs to be said.
Rich, you are on the clock. Let me run through your team really quickly. It's Dalvin Cook and Travis Kelce in the first 2 rounds, then Odell. And I was left speechless by this a little bit. A little surprise from you, Rich. A trio of running backs in Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, DeAndre Swift, Christian Kirk, and Sterling Shepard. If you want to talk us through your pick now and also your team construction so far, that would be wonderful.
Josh, man, I missed you, buddy. It's good to be on a show with you again. As my clock runs down here, I'll make sure not to clock out. But yeah, just kind of a unique draft for me. Definitely don't take a lot of running backs in that area, but with the extra flex spots, I was kind of just taking touches and just kind of seeing what happened. I think if I had it back, I would take DK Metcalf over Le'Veon Bell there in the 4th round. I'd like this team a lot more than I do right now, because then it put me in a bind and I had to chase, to fill these wide receiver spots, which I'm going to take wide receiver again now. And I wish I had a little more depth there that was a little more starting caliber. But yeah, so if you had to take it back, though, I think a lot of people will probably come and tell you that to try to defend their picks, but I'm going to tell you that my 4th round pick was exactly terrible.
Well, Reeves, talk us through these last 3 selections, because sometimes you put yourself in a bind like that, right? Take some picks you wish you could have back. But what do you think about these 3 wide receivers you've taken in a row? And Christian Kirk and Sterling Shepard and Preston Williams. I, for one, love that value of Sterling Shepard in the middle of the 8th round, because I think he has the inside track to be the Giants wide receiver 1 this year.
I think he's a really good bet to lead the team in targets, and I got him as the 3rd Giants, target. In all 3 games that those 3 guys played together, he led the team in targets and catches, especially when they played even with Daniel Jones. But the problem with Sterling Shepard is when you just look at that opening month outlook for the Giants and to take him as a starting player on your roster, there's just not going to be any week you feel good about playing him. When you look at, facing the Steelers, the Bears, the 49ers, and the Rams all in a row that opening month, it's not really that we're expecting the Giants passing game to be that good. It's probably more of you're hoping for a longer play. He's just going to be a floor play, not a lot of touchdown upside. It was just really me trying to get targets at this point because I missed out on all those wide receivers. So you definitely don't want to be in a spot where you're leaning on Sterling Shepard out of the blocks as a starting caliber player.
Yeah, you even pounded it home even more because, Darius Slayton and Golden Tate went ahead of him in this draft. So I, again, love that value in the middle of round 3. All right, Kate and Michelle, you are up on the clock right now. I will reiterate your team. It is Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders starting it off, then A.J. Brown, Leonard Fournette, Devontae Parker, Raheem Mostert, Tyler Higbee, and Anthony Miller. 30 seconds left. First, let's start. Who you're going to take here and why?
I think we're going to go with Deshaun Watson, right? So a couple of needs on our team. We already got our tight end. I think what we are going to go for is that top tier quarterback. I think when we're looking at the wide receivers, which we also need, none of them are popping out as these high upside options. And
we waited on wide receiver maybe a little bit too long. Went running back heavy to start, and as this is a 3 wide receiver starting league, we might be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, but that's okay. We'll make it work. We'll have Deshaun Watson. I do think that he has a chance to be maybe a little bit less efficient with DeAndre Hopkins on the field, and that might actually be good for fantasy football if he has to, sling the rock a little bit more.
Well, Michelle, let me ask you this, because it sounds like not you regret some of these picks, but maybe reading the room was difficult with so many of these running backs being pushed down, the wide receivers being moved up. Let's put it that way. What's been your favorite selection so far, Michelle?
So I was really happy to get Jacobs and Miles Sanders. Like getting Miles Sanders in the second round, I really love that. The issue was that a lot of the wide receivers I'm used to seeing there still in the 5th round, like the DK Metcalfs, your DJ Chark went in the 3rd. I'm used to getting him in the 5th. They flew off the board a little bit faster. So I do think maybe I would have taken a safer wide receiver than A.J. Brown in the 3rd, because right now he's our wide receiver 1. And it just feels a little bit risky looking at the other wide receivers we got to back him up.
And one more question, Kate. You guys quickly selected Josh Jacobs in round 1, and that was still with Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Kenyon Drake, Miles Sanders still on the board. That's some real, true conviction for a player like Josh Jacobs that I don't think a lot of people in the fantasy football world have.
I really like, especially just from a volume perspective. I know they keep bringing in literally every pass catching specialist in the tri-state area or beyond. But I do think that, if Josh Jacobs is healthy, he is going to catch some balls. But, I don't really think he needs it. Sort of like a Derrick Henry last season, didn't necessarily need those PPR points because he scored so many touchdowns. He was so productive last season. And he's playing with a broken shoulder. Like, I feel like we don't talk enough about the fact that I think he played like 6 or 7 games with a broken shoulder.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
And I personally have Drake and Sanders higher in my projections, but with them both dealing with an injury right now that we don't really know what it is, I have Josh Jacobs close enough that I'm comfortable switching over to him. And then we got Sanders in the 2nd. And Joe Mixon would never be a 1st-round pick by me, ever.
I thought Theo Riddick was working at UPS. I didn't even realize he was hanging around until he signed late last night.
Yeah. I don't think Theo Riddick knew he was still around until he signed last night.
Very fair. Very fair. All right, Daigle, let me turn back to you. How many drafts do you typically leave with Evan Ingram? I mean, you took him in round 8 here, and I think, like, in a vacuum, I really like Evan Ingram's situation because he's highly talented, highly athletic. He, if healthy, I think should be among the leaders at the tight end position. But he's not someone I'm ending up with often. We talked about this a lot this summer because he's kind of in that 2nd or 3rd tier of tight ends when we really like to pick from that 4th tier of tight ends.
Yeah, he is in the 2nd tier, but I have him leading off that tier and consider them a group of 5, typically with Mark Andrews and Zach Ertz right behind them. The only issue is that when he came back from injury, he was just used differently. He was blocking more, he ran fewer routes, and he saw fewer targets. Now, last year's Giants were all over the place, as we know. And I'm with Rich. I believe it's Sterling Shepard. We've talked about that all this offseason, that we believe he's the one that leads in targets. But fully healthy in a contract year, I still believe Evan Ingram is a top 5 option. And there's enough still in his favor to buck the other trends that are negative for the guys like Darren Waller, Tyler Higbee, the list goes on and on. So to me, it's more of a certain as opposed to those two, given their workloads and question marks.
Rich, since you've already nailed your tight end in Travis Kelce in round 2, what's your view of the position this year? Is it similar to Daigle's?
Yeah, I mean, it's typical every year. You just want to stay out of it. You don't want to panic and get involved in that mid tier. That's kind of where it's been the trap spot. If you look at, tight ends historically, 4 through 7, those guys haven't hit and they've busted at a higher rate than taking the lower end tight end ones. How crazy is that, Jason Garrett might actually be a plus for Evan Ingram? I mean, you just look at what Pat Shermer did to him the last 2 years. He's been totally used unlike the player he was coming out as a prospect. I mean, he's just 6 end zone targets the past 2 years. He has just 9 targets of 20 plus yards downfield combined the past 2 years. Dawson Knox had 10 last year. So, I mean, Evan Ingram's just been completely misused the past 2 years. It might be nice to actually see him be used like the prospect he was, coming out, just if the foot is healthy. But I mean, down here in round 8, definitely swing for the upside there. But yeah, definitely, I'm basically looking at, if, you don't get a Kelsey or Kittle, Andrews or an Ertz, just kind of, wait, see what happens, and then come back in later. I mean, obviously everyone has their favorite flavor of, tight end breakout this year. And we know it's not going to work out the way we all say with these young guys, because it never does. We typically only get, 3 to 4 like wire to wire performers at the position, but chase your upside guy, whoever you like. If it doesn't work out, then chase the next one, because you'll be in the same boat as a lot of teams in your league, either streaming the position or, trying to piece together, your tight end one option.
Rich, I love that you're back on the show, because you can just pull stats from like all over the place, like you're Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind. I mean, it's beautiful to see. All right. What's funny to me, again, with these industries drafts is a lot of favorites maybe in your home leagues can't go in the later rounds. Like we just had Chase Edmonds go. We just had A.J. Dillon go here, the top of round 10. And Kate and Michelle, I think maybe one of your favorites you just selected in James Washington that you didn't want to wait on anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we were looking for Zach Moss, but Andy stole him from us, so we'll forgive him. And we went with another guy. We're pretty high on James Washington. Now, Chase Claypool has great reviews coming out of camp, but I still think it's going to take time for him to get on the field and see too many snaps. James Washington should be the deep threat for Ben this year, and normally the deep threat for Ben is pretty great for fantasy. In the second half of last year, James Washington was actually a great fantasy option, in the flex at least.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, with the Steelers team, I mean, everyone is just undervalued right now. It's like this assumption that Ben isn't going to be close to what he was. Well, the last time he played a full season, he was like the quarterback too. And so Juju, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, even Eric Ebron a little bit later, not to tip anyone's picks here, I think would be interesting selections as well. Kate, what do you like about James Washington?
I really like the fact that he doesn't need a large target volume to be sustainable as a fantasy asset. That's just not really his game. I know Deontay Johnson and Juju are more of those sort of possession guys, but the beauty of James Washington is that he does what Ben Roethlisberger loves to do, and he loves to chuck up the ball into the air and hope for the best. And James Washington's pretty good at that. He definitely, I think, took a major leap in year 2 just from some of the moments that he made plays, like just obviously from a statistical perspective, but watching him play, I think he made important plays in big moments. And I think that is going to gain some of that trust factor for Ben too.
Rich, you just made your next selection. Before you, Chris Allen selected Kerryon Johnson, then Paris Campbell. Again, personal favorites are going off the board here. I think you got a bit of a discount here, Reeves, with Mike Williams dropping all the way to the 10th round.
Yeah, I mean, he's got that shoulder injury, so you never like to take guys that are already hurt in the preseason. But at this point, I'm just trying to get every wide receiver named Williams on the back end of the roster. But you look at Mike Williams; he's a guy I've drafted a lot all summer just because of where he goes and the types of targets he gets. And when you look at the Chargers depth chart, outside of Keenan Allen and him, it's Darius Jennings, Joe Reed, KJ Hill, Jason Moore, Jalen Guyton. I mean, if something were to happen to Keenan Allen, we were going to see a significant target jump from Mike Williams. And if he's a guy that can get into the 100 target area, he has like a Kenny Galladay in his range of outcomes. We've seen him oscillate, on the touchdown variants both years, 10 touchdowns, then 2 touchdowns, when truthfully he lies somewhere in the middle. He's top 5 though in top 40 receivers in targets that are deep targets and targets in the end zone. And Tyrod Taylor is actually a guy who's thrown more touchdowns outside of the red zone than in the red zone. So that kind of benefits a guy like Mike Williams when you think about the Chargers offense if they're going to have passing touchdowns. He's just really kind of just an all upside shot. Obviously, we know where the floor lies with Mike Williams. There's not a lot of targets to latch onto, but the types of targets that he does get are valuable for fantasy. And if something were to happen to Keenan Allen, that depth chart is just wide open.
And in the range he falls, he's the upside pick. That's why I like him so much in those middle rounds.
All right, Daigle, we're on to you. Two-part question. You just selected Deshaun Jackson, who you know is a personal favorite of mine. But more importantly, for those of us watching on YouTube, you saw a reaction of John Daigle after he selected Deshaun Jackson. JJ, who was on a run of running backs, selected a Daigle favorite in Darrell Henderson. So answer both of those, Daigle.
He's on a run of pissing me off is what he's doing. So I like Deshaun Jackson. And most importantly, I try to keep an eye on week 1 for redraft leagues. And I can already tell you I'm starting Deshaun Jackson, the flex, against Washington over J.K. Dobbins, who will likely enter as a 3 or 4 man committee. So that's kind of to fill that role for me, trying to get production in week 1 at least. And then it came down to Bart Scott or Tony Pollard, since JJ took Darrell Henderson, because I still believe, yes, the hamstring injury is concerning, and it seems like everyone has a hamstring injury, including myself nowadays. But I think the Henderson and Akers backfield is the arbitrage of Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert. And so I like to get them, no matter the league, thinking I could get a handful of starts out of both, even though it's still likely Akers who leads that backfield in touches. And so since I couldn't, I went past the handcuff, which I think Pollard is, and instead went to Boston Scott, who I still believe has a role from week 1 on, and any lingering Miles Sanders injury, although I'm not believing it, any lingering Sanders injury would obviously propel him into a bigger role.
All right, Rich, you are back on the clock again. You are on a streak of 4 straight wide receivers: Christian Kirk, Sterling Shepard, Preston Williams, and Mike Williams. What's going through your head right now?
Just trying to get more targets, man. Just guys to throw at this because, obviously I've got all my running back touches, and all those guys can start for me, all those running backs with the multiple flex spots. So I can play all those guys too. So I'm just trying to throw as many targets as I can and hope something pans out and I can line up some schedules and try to get some guys to play. I love the Deshaun Jackson take. I mean, especially he's going to be a real popular DFS guy in week 1, just like he was last year, just because he's going to be so counted on early. As Rigor gets, acclimated, they really only have him and Zach Ertz, to kind of lean on. And if Rager is a guy that can occupy multiple positions, that helps Deshaun Jackson, because if you think about last year when he only played really 1 full game, he caught both those touchdowns from the slot. They can use him as kind of that deep target, a la Andrew Luck, T.Y. Hilton, where it's not a tertiary slot guy, it's a guy getting free releases and running those posts and those flag routes that we like to get those big targets on. So I love Deshaun Jackson around that spot too.
Kate and Michelle, I have to be honest with you. I set this draft up for 16 rounds because I was hoping for everyone to, highlight a few of their favorites in rounds 14 and 15 and 16. That might come back to bite me because it feels like a lot of personal favorites, again, are going right now in Paris Campbell and Laviska Shenault and N'Keal Harry. I will be fascinated to see who is left when we get onto later rounds. Luckily, you will not have to go through your picks at that time. But I do want to ask you this. When you are on the clock, and you're on the clock right now, do you kind of have like a short list of players that you're highlighting that you're like, okay, these are the ones I want to make sure that I'm leaving at this point in the draft?
You want to go first?
Yeah. So, I think it all comes down to looking at the roster you've constructed so far. So, when I'm looking at our positions like quarterback and tight end, I'm a big Tyler Higbee fan. So I feel like we have those positions locked up. Obviously, we have a ton of depth at running back. I feel very comfortable there. So, my goal during these late rounds is going to be to find some of these guys that could be stepping into a bigger role in the receiving game. And that's why we're going to draft Bryan Edwards, because he's getting all of the hype out of Raiders camp. Going to be exciting to see sort of how that offense shakes out. But we do know the opportunity will be there, and it sounds like he's adapting well to the offense. So I'm going to shoot my shot there.
Daigle, your thoughts on that selection? Because just from looking at it as, an impartial observer from this outside, I might be just a tiny bit nervous, and you too might not be, but I am, that my wide receiver 4 and my wide receiver 5 are James Washington and Bryan Edwards, but both have major potential and ceilings to make good on those values as well.
What's funny is that in high stakes leagues, like you look at the $1,800 FFPC main event, and Tyrell Williams wasn't even being drafted before the torn labrum. It was all Bryan Edwards in the last round. So one, I usually don't knock anyone's last round pick because we're all just out here throwing darts, man. It's a last round pick. But Bryan Edwards has been one of the ones who has been consistently getting rave reviews at camp. We started off with everyone from Devontae Booker to Nelson Aguilar getting rave reviews from Raiders camp. So I just ignored all of it. But Edwards is the one who pops literally every single day. So it seems like it's trending in that direction as it did with Darren Waller, where despite the public not knowing who he is, the coaches are talking him up enough where they're talking him into an every down role, or at least a starting role in 3 wide sets from week 1 on.
Reeves, this is a big picture question. And so hopefully you have a nice, beautiful answer for it. But this is a preseason and a fantasy season unlike any other, in that we have no preseason games. What has that changed for you process-wise, or has it changed anything for you process-wise?
I mean, just trying to dissect, through some of these nuggets without having games. The biggest thing about preseason wasn't seeing these guys play; it was seeing where they played. Last year we knew Terry McLaurin was going to be a big part of the Washington offense when he played 1 snap the opening preseason game, and played 17 snaps the rest of the preseason, and they put him on the ice. We knew that Malcolm Brown was ahead of Darrell Henderson coming out of last preseason. We're going to lose a lot of those nuggets this year. We don't get to see who plays the 3rd wide receiver when the Packers come out in 3 wide. We don't get to see if Josh Jacobs is in that first 3rd and 7. We don't get to see if Chris Thompson comes in on that first 3rd and 7 the Jaguars have. So it's all trying to read some of the stuff through the reporting. And we are not getting a lot of reporting. And you see a team like the Packers basically banned reporting from their beat writers, which is a very interesting track to take. But so, I mean, you just want to try to avoid some of these opinion-based narratives that are going around, try to dissect some of the actual reporting that we're getting. It's not a lot. And then I'm just concerned in general this season about just injuries altogether. I mean, when you look at this condensed preseason and condensed offseason, and you just go back to 2011, a guy like Edwin Porras has highlighted that, in that 2011 preseason, which had a training camp and had a preseason, conditioning-based injuries were up 38% that year. We could be a season where a lot of people are concerned about COVID this year, but the things that could happen this year, it's really just natural injuries are heightened. And we've got a lot of hamstrings, we've got a lot of quads, groins, stuff like that, guys missing a week or 2 at a time, and then just, throwing things into chaos. It's going to be an interesting season from that perspective, I think, more from the injury concern, because I think that it's going to open the door, and we've already seen it in preseason already, just through a week and a half of these injuries that are stacking for these guys.
Well, Denny Carter, after starting with 4 wide receivers, just ended a run of 5 running backs with James White, Chase Edmonds, A.J. Dillon, Tony Pollard, and I think maybe the steal of the draft so far in Latavius Murray at the top of round 12. We'll get to him in this next group. Kate and Michelle, once again, you're on the clock. Is another favorite here?
Another one of our favorite guys just got stolen, Bryce Love. We really wanted him. I thought it was maybe even too early to take him here, but I was going to because I didn't want to lose on Bryce Love, but it seems like
that's the thing with these industry mocks. They never come out the way that you expect. You have to pivot and not freak out.
We pivoted to Nyheim Hines. So only would draft him in PPR leagues, but I think in PPR leagues he should see a lot of targets this year with Phillip Rivers. So I'm fine taking him this late as someone that hopefully can be a flex player sometimes in good matchups.
Let's go back to Bryce Love then, because Howard Bender did take him at the top of round 12. Why are you into Bryce Love this year? Is it the training camp buzz like Reeves just alluded to?
I've been really high on Bryce Love this whole offseason. I was starting to get nervous he wasn't going to get the opportunity with Darius Geis back healthy, but since he's no longer with the team, I do think Bryce Love has already shown that he's probably the most talented running back in that backfield as a all-around running back. I'm not talking about Antonio Gibson, who can be used in the slot his rookie season. I don't see a world where Gibson can get too many carries in his rookie year when he's not familiar with being even a running back. And I don't know how he's going to translate to that in the NFL immediately. So I do think Bryce Love is super well-rounded, and he can be used in the passing game, even though he wasn't used much at Stanford. All we're hearing out of camp is that he's doing fantastic. He's healthy, and Ron Rivera seems to really like him.
Yeah, I don't think that Scott Turner can just go away from an offense that they, supported the leader in running back targets for 3 straight seasons and just not throw to their running back at all. So I understand the interest in that backfield. All right, Reeves, you are back on the clock. Take us through it.
I mean, I'm just throwing darts here at this point. So, I mean, I'm just going to take Justin Jackson just to see what happens and shakes out behind Austin Eckler. He's another guy. He's another guy where preseason we won't get that nugget on. First and goal. Who's the first guy in for the Chargers? There's no lock that it's going to be Austin Eckler. A guy that's 200 pounds. He's only converted 4 of 13 carries inside the 5-yard line for touchdowns. It could be a Joshua Kelly. It could be a Justin Jackson that comes in. So I'm just throwing a dart to see if maybe I can get that complimentary role. I typically like taking Joshua Kelly a little bit more. But we'll see what happens here. Just Jackson appears to be like the Benny Snell, where he's ahead of Anthony McFarland. It's kind of where we are right now. Justin Jackson, he just appears to be a little bit ahead of Josh Kelly right now, and that could definitely oscillate in season. But no real analysis there. Just throwing a dart at another running back.
I don't think we really talked about Brashad Perryman, who was your previous pick. I know he's been sidelined right now, and truly, the Jets are running out starting wide receivers that I've never even heard of. Let's say Brashad Perryman is healthy in week 1, Reeves. What's your outlook for him?
Just targets are available there. We know that Jamison Crowder is not a guy that can carry a passing game, even though he's a strong bet to lead the team in targets. I've been taking a lot of Chris Herndon for the same reason. But obviously he's going to fight with intermediate targets with Jamison Crowder as well. So just someone that does something a little bit different in that offense that's not, fighting for targets at the same level of their offensive targets that, Crowder and Herndon are going to fight for, with Denzel Mims being sidelined, just kind of, taking a shot again at targets just to throw at, this wide receiver spot that I put myself in a bind in.
All right, Dago, you're going to wrap up your time as a group here at the end of round 12. Again, last 2 selections were Deshaun Jackson and Boston Scott. Who are going here in round 12?
Man, the Justin Jackson pick just threw me for a loop. I'm totally on board. I think he has a little edge, and that's enough, especially since he averaged 8 touches per game in the first 3 contests without Melvin Gordon last year. I'm going with the worst pick to end on, and that's Mohamed Sanu, who at the very least has a role. He played a career low slot rate outside of Julian Edelman in his only full healthy game for the Patriots last year. So he'll have a week 1 role, especially now that N'Keal Harry continues to draw bad reports from camp and struggle against NFL competition. So it's just a guy, Josh. What do you want me to say?
I don't know, man. It kind of sounds like all 4 of you are going through some torture at the moment, and maybe I set you up for the wrong spot here. But no one's thrilled with their picks in round 12. Which who am I to?
Or maybe does that mean you set us up for the right spot because you put us in uncomfortable situations, got to see us outside of our elements.
I'll end on something quickly better than that. I think it's going to be the most interesting week 1 perhaps ever in DFS because it's the most ambiguous one. And so the knowledge we think we know, you can easily leverage those assumptions in large entry tournaments and just turn it on people, especially like we mentioned the Packers closing reports. For all we know, Jake Kumaro is the number 2 receiver there. And so I am looking forward to that in week 1 of DFS.
All right. I got to boot you all out of here. Once again, thank you so much for all of you. Sorry, that was a bit abrupt. I will shout you all out, though. You all know Rich Rebar at Lord Reeves on Twitter with Sharp Football Analysis. Kate and Michelle Majuk at FF Ball Blast on Twitter and at Ball Blastum. They're great. I know that Kate is helping us out on Rotoworld this year as well. And now we enter Group 4. For rounds 13 through 16, and that will be Denny Carter, JJ Zacharyson, and Lauren Carpenter. Before we get there, I do want to remind you all again about our season-long tools and draft guide. That's rotoworld.com/edge. And I always keep forgetting to mention we have a free mock draft simulator that you can go and check out in there. Everyone, I don't think that the mock draft simulator will come up with a draft quite like this one. JJ, let me start with you, all right? Because you have the 101. Hello, everyone, by the way. Good to see you. Life is easy after the Christian McCaffrey selection, but kind of take us through the construction of your roster so far. I know that's a big picture and a large question here, and your last 2 picks have been T.J. Hawkins and Rob Gronkowski at tight end.
Yeah, so at the 101 spot, you're generally looking at a situation, especially in a format like this, where wide receiver could become pretty dominant just given the scoring settings, and you're starting 3 wideouts. You have a couple extra flexes. I really looked at this and said, I'm going to get CMC as my anchor and probably just get a ton of wide receivers, given the fact that a lot of the folks that I'm drafting with are likely to go wide receiver heavy too. So I was really hoping for Kenny Golladay. I'm even wearing the Babytron shirt today. Was hoping for Golladay to drop, but ended up getting Chris Godwin and Adam Thielen. I think, Thielen, people might see that as a little bit of a reach over Juju or Allen Robinson. or OBJ. I mean, I think most would have them in the same tier. I have Adam Thielen ahead of them, though, because he's one of the few guys that has that 150 target upside this year. I was going to continue to go with wide receivers, but then DK Metcalf and Hollywood Brown got sniped right before I got Jonathan Taylor, who I see as one of the few RB2s that I really care to draft this year. I think he just has that kind of upside. And then, just continued that wide receiver heavy build. And then now that I'm in the late rounds, I'm really just throwing darts. I feel fortunate to be able to get Hawkinson and Gronk as two tight ends that I could cycle through each week hypothetically. And then, to back up the Jonathan Taylor at the RB2 spot, I have Tariq Cohen, Damian Harris, Darrell Henderson, and Duke Johnson, just guys who, could end up seeing more work in their split backfields than we imagine right now.
Well, 11 quarterbacks have gone off the board, JJ, and you and Denny are, I think, the only ones that have not selected a quarterback at this time. Denny, I mean,
Yes.
Is it going to happen right here, right now, when you're on the clock?
It's most definitely not going to happen now. This is an exercise in branding overall.
Yes.
I'm like 20% kidding, but I'm trying to pile up as many backup running backs, as many guys that probably have a lock on the backup role on their respective teams, because as you may have seen, my running backs are on the weak side. And that's what happens when you go 0 RB. So that's been my goal here. I have Latavius, Pollard, AJ Dillon, Chase Edmonds. Those are all guys who I think would kind of fall into some volume if the starter on their team went down. And now with the 154th pick, I'm going to take Benny Snell.
Oh gosh. Let's not tweet out that clip of Benny Snell over at quarterbacks, because we might get buzzed for that. But Denny, let me say this. One, you're welcome, because I got to set this draft order, and I wasn't going to put you at the beginning like I did with JJ. I got to put you at the end because I knew the state of euphoria that you could come in with, getting 4 wide receivers to start, and then a streak of 6 running backs after that, which you just closed on. Is this heaven?
It is. I appreciate that. My eyes bulged when I saw I had the 10th pick, because it's just exactly where I want to be. It's not a pretty lineup. I will say that. I'm going to have to start James White and David Johnson, and the David Johnson pick was honestly one of the most nauseating things I've ever had to do. But eventually you have to start taking running backs, and I felt like he fell far enough, and he might see enough volume, if he can stay healthy this year. So I'm up again here, and I do kind of think that it might be time for a quarterback, because I don't really see any other great 0 RB targets. DeAndre Washington is one. There's some question as to whether he's been practicing, I think, right now, which as a Rotoworld writer, you would think I would know. But I do not at the moment. It might be time for quarterback. Let's see, I have 2 more bench spots and then the quarterback spot to fill. And no, we're shifting. I'm calling it off. We're not drafting around.
This is like a war of wits between you and JJ right now.
We're just playing chicken right now. I have 23 seconds to draft. I do need to pick someone eventually. No, we are shifting to quarterback. Yes.
Okay.
No,
All right.
We're going quarterback. We're going with Cam Newton.
Okay, good.
We're going with Cam Newton in the 15th round. 14th.
Do you have anything positive to say about Cam Newton before I move on?
Anything positive?
Yeah.
If he gets to that 100+ rush seasons, that he used to have in Carolina, that might not be hateful. So
No.
That's the one positive.
All right. Well, we know that Denny and JJ have both been on this show quite often. This is the first time for Lauren Carpenter. Lauren, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, let's run through some of your teams so far. You started
Can
with
we just skip past those middle rounds? Just to talk about those first 4. And
so everyone has said that, that it's so funny when we talk about the summer on shows, you want to avoid those running backs in rounds 4 through 6. Well, if it's 12 writers from the football universe, then someone has to take those running backs in rounds 4 through 6. But let's go run through your team. Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, Chris Carson, and Keenan Allen, Michael Gallup, Hunter Henry, Russell Wilson, Emmanuel Sanders, Philip Lindsay, and then just, a bunch of shots that include Curtis Samuel and Randall Cobb and Blake Jarwin. Lauren, tell us about it. How do you feel?
Nervous. This is ridiculous. I had this whole plan ready to go, and I was like, I'm going to rule this draft. This is going to be great. I was having so much fun. Come round like 6, I'm like, this is awful. I think you guys are too good at this. I can't. That's why we're all experts here. I say we. I just want to be cool because I'm literally on the same, recording as you. So I'm just going to pretend I'm as cool as y'all. But it's been fun. These are those fun rounds right now. I love being at the end where I'm just like, close your eyes, put their faces on a dartboard and throw. So, have a little bit of fun. I am glad I got to snag a little bit of Blake Jarwin, although someone took my Chris Herndon.
Yes.
Not happy about that either. But yeah, it's been cool. It's been fun. I don't particularly enjoy drafting from the middle very much. So
sorry.
Yeah, I don't like drafting in the middle.
I apologize.
Strategies always just go straight down the toilet.
Well, let's talk about your first 3 picks, because you probably didn't head into this thinking that you were going to start off with 3 running backs. How did it happen?
No, that was just, why not?
Okay.
Why not try it out? Gosh. All right, how much time do I have here? Oh, I have a minute. Okay.
You have a minute. And I also want to apologize because, I told the last group this, that I thought stretching this to 16 rounds would allow some of you to come up and show some of your favorite late round selections. Then I realized that all of those are being selected in like rounds 10 through 12. So I'll be fascinated to see who actually gets drafted in these final 2 or 3 rounds. Lauren, who are you going to go with here?
So I'm really happy with my running backs. I am happy with my tight ends. I'm happy with my quarterback here. So I'm going to continue to take some dart throws. So I'm going to go and get a little piece of that Bengals offense. Just in case. Just in case. So I'm going to go ahead and take me some John Ross. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know if I like this, but you know what? It's a dart throw, so I'll take it. Why not?
Do you think the Bengals offense could be like Rams offense of a few years ago when it was Sean McVay's first year and he kind of unlocked all the pass catching weapons that they had there on a team that everyone thought the offensive line was going to be garbage?
I think it's a possibility. I don't usually like to rely on rookies very often, especially when it comes to a rookie quarterback. And in this weird abbreviated offseason we have, I'm not sure, but I don't want to miss out. So if I have a piece, they're just going to be stacking in my bench. So why not? Well, why not take a shot in case, AJ Green cannot stay healthy. He can't stay on the field. At least John Ross is there to be a little piece of that improved offense as well as improved offensive line. So we'll see. I'm curious.
Well, a few other picks in this round: Raquel Armstead, DeAndre Washington, Sonny Michel finally went off the board, Darrington Evans as well. JJ, we're about to come to you on the clock. Again, I mentioned that I was hoping we'd be able to highlight some favorite late rounders. I'm sure a lot of yours have already been selected, but is there anyone jumping to mind right now as you're about to hit the turn?
Yeah, I mean, obviously not a ton of guys that I'm like jumping for joy over right now. But I would say, one player that I have in my mind right now, now that I am officially up, and he's still on the board, is Steven Sims for Washington. They don't really have that number 2 right now. I do like Andy Golden. I think that there's some upside there for the rookie. And then I also am a Logan Thomas stan, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of role he can carve out for them. But we did see Sims, get sort of that high floor role in towards the end of last year. And really, I think a lot of people saw a lot of upside there, but it was just because he fell into some touchdowns. He had some touchdown fortune down the stretch. But this late in the draft, I mean, I'm really just shooting for upside. I'm looking to see if someone can carve out that role. And I think that, as poor as that Washington offense might end up being, there's a lot of ambiguity there, and that just drives down costs for a lot of these players, which is why I'm targeting a lot of the running backs this year in that backfield. I love Terry McLaurin, obviously, but I like Logan Thomas as a dart throw. He's still on the board, obviously, because no one's drafting Logan Thomas right now. But I'm going to go Steven Sims with this first one at the, what turn is this? The 15-16 turn or the 14-15 turn? Yeah. So I hadn't picked a wide receiver in a while after going pretty heavy wide receiver to start the draft. I'm going to continue to look at wide receiver here. A couple people are on my mind. I won't say them totally out loud, I guess, because I might try to get one of them in the next round. I might just play it safe.
Quarterback at some point, JJ. I mean,
I do, but I'm trying to show the people that you can wait and still get a good quarterback here, Josh. I mean, look, if you look at the quarterbacks on the board right now, you still have Tom Brady. You have Aaron Rodgers is fine, but I really like Jared Goff this year. Week 1, actually the first 5 weeks of the season, Jimmy Garoppolo has a great schedule, so I'd be fine with getting Jimmy Garoppolo and then streaming. So I'm really not that concerned with the quarterback position right now, and I know that I'm the last team to not select one. So I'm just going to wait and continue to wait, hoping that no one's taking backups, which I don't think that we will in a group like this. I'm going to go with someone who's old enough to be some of our fathers. I'm going to draft Larry Fitzgerald here. He's still going to have some sort of role in that Arizona offense. I think people just write him off because of his age, but he'll still see some sort of a role. You'd see a lot of 4 wide receiver sets there. Even though DeAndre Hopkins is there, Fitz should still carve out a 15 to 20% target share. As a bye week fill-in, he's not too bad.
Well, JJ, absolutely love it. That means your final pick, unless you just punt the position entirely, will be a quarterback in this draft.
That's right.
Denny, you've known JJ for a very long time. Is he being honest with us? Is this truly for the brand? I mean, you talk about at late round quarterback. This is at final round quarterback here.
Right. Well, I've seen JJ take elite quarterbacks when they fall, and that's something that of course sets people ablaze on Twitter. And how is the late round quarterback guy taking Mahomes or Jackson or whoever? And back in the day, it used to be Rodgers. I think JJ ended up with Rodgers some crazy value maybe 4 or 5 years ago before Rodgers was bad. And sorry, maybe that's too much, but but it is a situation where everybody is a value at some point in the draft, and obviously my co-host partner recognizes that. And I believe JJ, you were close to taking Lamar Jackson here, right?
I was, at that 4-5 turn, so the research that I've done shows that the elite quarterbacks, the Lamar Jackson, the Patrick Mahomes, that tier, they really in the middle of the 4th round is where I think that the opportunity cost, and what the research has shown is the opportunity cost isn't significantly high. A lot of people are taking them in the late 2nd, early 3rd. I'm out there, but if they drop to the mid 4th, it's a little bit more appetizing. But the problem is in a league like this, where people are drafting their quarterbacks later and later, you're not gaining that equity as you would in a normal draft if they're falling to the mid 4th. So I looked at it, and I looked at Lamar Jackson. Both Lamar Jackson and Mahomes were on the board when I took Jonathan Taylor and T.Y. Hilton. And I strongly considered going with one of them, but just given the room and reading the room, I knew that I would be able to get a usable quarterback late.
Lauren, I asked this question to Rich in the last group, but I also want to pose it to you. I know that this is an off season unlike any other, in that we don't have preseason, and even training camp access has been limited by some teams. How has that changed your process at all this year? Are you less interested, more interested in rookies? Has it changed anything in terms of how you've been drafting in these last few weeks?
It has kind of turned me off even more so from rookies than I am in redraft. It's just this offseason, the inability to create reps is essential. You can't build chemistry off of Zoom calls. No offense. I know we are developing really good chemistry right here, but it's not the same on the football field, so that does worry me. There is also a possibility that it becomes rookies come in and save the day. You never know. So my strategy has been slightly altered. I am finding myself leaning more towards backups, especially for the running back position, and maybe drafting an extra quarterback just to be on the safe side if there are some, talent, or there is still talent left towards the end of those drafts. Like Matt Stafford and Matt Ryan were some of the later round ones I was keeping my eye on out. But that's kind of how I'm changing it. Not too drastic, but just enough where it does change some of those late round picks.
Well, Denny, we just passed one of those late round picks for you. It's JJ Arcega-Whiteside. I also want to reiterate, and I missed this when you were up on the clock, your Cam Newton is somewhat of a stack with James White. I actually really like James White where you selected him.
Thank you. That's very nice. You're the first person in the whole industry to compliment my James White pick, because I've been getting raked over the coals for it, and maybe rightfully so. But yeah, I don't mind James White, especially the way that I'm putting together my team here. Also, another thing about Cam is he has a pretty good early season schedule, if I remember correctly. So, if he doesn't shape up as like an every week starter, which I think he will in a 12-team league, he would just be droppable, and you could work the the waiver wire here. My last pick is coming up here in a minute, and I think you won't believe this, Josh, but I was considering taking another backup running back, or third or fourth string running back. This time it might be Dare from Tampa.
Okay.
Some might know him as Dare. So I think I'm going to take him just in case. I mean, when you are targeting these late round running backs, you do want to have them in good offenses, in high scoring offenses, and offenses that will see at least some neutral and positive game script. And I think, Tampa is a pretty good candidate to see that kind of game script that would be beneficial to a running back. He's not going to see much if this season starts right now, many touches per game. But he would just kind of be a stash for now. And I don't really see anybody else. Maybe Gus Edwards comes off as that sort of play as well. More so than Justice Hill. And Jalen Richard possibly, but he's not going to see any carries no matter what happens.
I mean, I'm really asking you guys to go deep with this final round. So I'm stressing the expert label here. Yeah. So you went with Dario Ogunbowale, and I'll just circle back here before we move on with the Cam Newton and namely James White. I really like James White this year. I mean, the only issue is I think he's going as the running back 32, and he's my running back 33. So I'm basically just with consensus with him. Meanwhile, Damian Harris, who's climbed in the last 2 weeks, is still going around the running back 50, but in this draft went less than a full round later than Damian Harris. So I'll have him closer to running back 44. All right, Lauren, we're coming back on to your pick in a few. Who were a few of your target selections that maybe some other people? You mentioned Chris Herndon, and then you pivoted over to Blake Jarwin. Is there anyone else that you just missed out on in this draft?
Everyone past the, I think, 5th round for everyone else's team is who I wanted. So yeah, it was having fun getting sniped left and right. There's a lot of players in here. I think for my own team, really quick, I'm loving that Russell Wilson, even though he was high for me. I usually really like waiting on quarterbacks too, but I couldn't help it for some reason. It was calling my name. So right now I'm actually looking to draft another quarterback because I can, and it's COVID, and maybe I'll need to have another quarterback. Hopefully they both don't get sick during the season. I don't know, but yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and keep my eye on another late round quarterback. But they're whoever Latavius Murray, we're gonna fight. Okay, that's what I thought. All right, be prepared to hear from me. I'm warning you now.
How did he drop so far? I was shocked that he was there.
I was too. I couldn't believe he was there. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, I hope no one else knows. And then boop, right off the board. I'm like, you kidding me? Oh.
You said that Russell Wilson spoke to you. What did he say? Like what made you pick Russell Wilson? I mean, we all want him to be unleashed this season, but even if that's not a possibility, him being selected, I believe, as the he's the quarterback 3. So you're the third person to select a quarterback here. Yeah,
Russell Wilson actually had his wife sing to me. I heard it through my earphones right here that are stuck in my eardrums. She was like, draft me. So I was like, okay, I have to now. But no, I like Russell Wilson. I really like what he can do with his feet. I like the talent around him. And I have Tyler Lockett too, I believe. So I like that stack. And again, I just picked up Ben Roethlisberger as my very last pick. Actually, I was going to target Antonio Brown. That's kind of in deeper drafts with a little bit bigger bench. I have been taking Antonio Brown just in case. Just in case, you never know. If I have the space to spare it, why not stash them? So I don't know, but this was interesting being with all of you smart experts here. I was decent at drafting. Now I feel like I need to go I don't know, feel better about myself and listen to sad music.
No, I think everyone had some picks that they loved and they didn't. I want you all to stick around if you can for a moment after this and run through your teams. But JJ, you are the last pick of this 16-round PPR draft. I mean, are you going to bring it home for us?
Yeah, I mean, look, so I have Chris Godwin on my team already, so I can get the stack with Tom Brady. There's really two paths for quarterbacks to have elite upside in fantasy football. One of them is via their legs and what they can do on the ground running, which we've seen, with Lamar Jackson, but obviously he did it with his arm too last year. But it's also just to see, if they can get an unsustainable touchdown rate. That's the other way they can be a true top 3, top 5 guy. I think Tom Brady has that in his range of outcomes given the weapons that he has. So going with Tom Brady here, hoping that he can get that 30 touchdown season in him. I don't think it's likely per se, but I think it's at least in his range of outcomes.
And not only do you have Chris Godwin, you also have Rob Gronkowski. So
that's right. I forgot I have Gronk too. Yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go. All right. Can you guys hang around for like 3 minutes and we can run through each of your teams? Does that work?
Yeah.
Why don't we go with you first, Denny? Again, this was euphoria for you. I mean, this was a dream scenario. Devontae Adams, Julio Jones, DJ Chark, and Tyler Lockett as your first 4 selections. You have locked in those top 4 wide receivers. After that, Zach Ertz, David Johnson, Jamison Crowder, James White. I mean, this run of running backs and Chase Edmonds, A.J. Dillon, Tony Pollard, Latavius Murray, so on and so forth with Cam Newton as your quarterback. Give me the highs, Denny, and give me the lows.
So I'm not a big tight end guy. Like I'm not, keying in on the top 2, Kittle and Kelsey. And I don't usually stumble into Andrews. But if Andrews or Ertz fall, well past their ADP, I'm fine taking them. And Ertz is boring. JJ has made this very clear. Ertz is boring, but it's 130 tight end targets most likely. And, getting him in the 5th, it was not my plan at all. I never would have thought that I would do that, but he was there. So I took him, and then I kind of shifted mostly to running back. So that was an unexpected pick, one that I just don't usually end up making. I feel like I stacked up enough of these late round running backs so that I have a chance for 1 or maybe 2 of them to be useful, if not for the whole season, then part of the season. If one of the running backs in front of them misses a few weeks and then they become useful, and that's all you really need. Is just some serviceable running backs to go along with what hopefully would be a dominant set of receivers. For instance, I think I have Tyler Lockett as my wide receiver 4. Maybe, yeah. So, that's not bad. Although, obviously that the sacrifice is that David Johnson is my RB1. So,
well, but you also, Jamison Crowder is your wide receiver 5, and he might end the season with 125 targets. So I think you could do worse in your wide receiver 5 in that scenario. It's basically what we talked about in a previous show, Denny, of the draft tips you should follow. And you definitely advocate for 0 running back. And look what you did here. All right, let's go to Lauren Carpenter's team. Her quarterback, Russell Wilson, Keenan Allen, Michael Gallup, Emmanuel Sanders as her 3 wide receivers. Running backs, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, and then both the flex right now, Chris Carson and Phillip Lindsay, Hunter Henry at tight end, and then a bench right now of Curtis Samuel, N'Keal Harry, Randall Cobb, Blake Jarwin, and John Ross, among others, including Ben Roethlisberger as the backup quarterback. Lauren, I know, again, everyone in this draft had picks they wish they could take back, but overall, what's the feeling of your team?
I actually like my team, but I have to just say real quick, Denny, we're going to fight twice now because I thought I had Tyler Lockett, and then I remembered you sniped him from me as well, which is I wanted to have the Tyler Lockett, Russell Wilson stack, which didn't happen. So I think that's the one I'm the most upset about missing out on. So sorry I ended up thinking I had your player, but really he's actually mine. But I'm lending him to you.
That's that works. That works. I mean, I can
just so we're on the same page. Just
I can hand them back. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pick a fight with these picks.
Yeah, I think you're gonna be 0 for 2, Denny, on that front too, by the way. So
watching you. I don't really think there's a pick here that I didn't like or I didn't care for. And whatever this David Johnson nausea is, Denny, fight number 3 coming right here, right now. But yeah, so my wide receivers, I think, are a little bit weaker than what I would have wanted, but that's what happens when you take 3 running backs in a row. But I don't hate it. I mean, I'm surprised Keenan Allen is as far down in the draft as he is, and I'm happy to have him as my wide receiver 1. I did grab Greg Ward from the Eagles, just in case. A lot of these are just in case picks, but I really like my starting squad, so I'm happy with it.
All right, JJ, let's close out with you. Let me pull it up right here. This was the 101 selection, so there's a little bit of an advantage heading in. You know, maybe a little bias I showed towards JJ here since we're both, I guess, JJ's at heart. Tom Brady, again, the final selection. One of us is good, one of us is bad. We'll let you decide. Then Chris Godwin, Adam Thielen, T.Y. Hilton as the 3 wide receivers, Christian McCaffrey and Jalen Taylor at 2 running back, T.J. Hawkinson and Gronk, depending, at tight end. Then, again, your flexes, Deontay Johnson, Brandon Cooks, and then a bench of Tariq Cohen, Damian Harris, Darrell Henderson, Duke Johnson, some real upside running backs there. JJ, what's the outlook here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I did what I wanted to do for sure. You have that luxury when you're at the 101, you know, when you're taking Christian McCaffrey to be that anchor at running back for you, and then you can sort of pick and choose your RB2. And I didn't really think that I was going to get a Jonathan Taylor type there. He's one of the few, him and like James Conner, maybe Chris Carson, one of the few RB2s that I'm actually interested in this year, because I do think that, you know, by week 4 or 5, Jonathan Taylor, just given his talent, given his profile, could easily just take over that backfield. My outlook with Jonathan Taylor is I'm not going to let Marlon Mack stop me from drafting Jonathan Taylor this year. So behind that offensive line, he could do a whole lot. So I like Jonathan Taylor a lot. And then, like you said, I just tried to throw some high upside darts with the running backs on my bench. I will say I probably reached a little bit for Damian Harris, but that's sort of what you have to do when you're at the turn in these drafts. But I do think that Harris has the kind of upside. I mean, we're seeing reports out of Patriots camp, of him being sort of a Sony Michel plus, where he's able to at least catch some passes out of the backfield, and maybe that'll hurt Denny's boy James White a little bit. So I do like Damian Harris more than I expected to entering the season for sure, just given the fact that historically, you know, running backs in particular who don't perform well their rookie season generally don't go on to have very great fantasy careers. And Darrell Henderson kind of fits that bill as well, but you know, their costs are the way they are because of that. So, you know, they're a little bit attractive from that standpoint.
Well, we did it, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Our 16-round, let's call it industry draft. Denny, JJ, thank you so much. Lauren, so great to meet you. If anyone out there wants to follow Lauren on Twitter at Stepmom Lauren, she writes for Fantasy Footballers. She's also writing for Rotoworld. So we're really excited to have her this season as well. JJ's podcast, Late Round Podcast. It's pretty good. Go and listen to that if you want to. And Denny, we'll talk soon. Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate it. And everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us. This was a bit of a leap of faith, but again, the 12 people that joined us really made it worth our while. It was fascinating to me to see the different processes, the different ways to construct teams. Again, if you're listening to this on the podcast version and want the YouTube version, just go over to NBC Sports' YouTube page and vice versa. Again, we have so many podcasts logged on the Rotoworld Football Podcast from this entire summer that can help you out. And hopefully help you win your league. Go back into that backlog and listen to those. And one more shout out for our premium products, our draft guide and our season-long tools, annual or monthly. That is rotoworld.com/edge, and use promo code DRAFT10 to get $10 off. That is going to do it for us here. Thank you to producer Chris. I am Josh Norris. We will talk to you all later in the week. Up the Villa. Talk to you soon.